Hello, folks.
Hi, Chaz.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
All right, I think we are ready to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I will call the meeting to order at 12:02 p.m. As your vice chair, I will be chairing today since our wonderful chair is sick, but still joining us virtually. Let's start with a quick round of introductions for the Budget Committee members. I'm Nancy Wise, Commissioner.
Zano Juro, Commissioner.
Pat Malone.
Curtis Wright, 6.
Chaz Jones, public member.
Welcome, everyone. And with that, let's go ahead and get started.
Good to see all of you this afternoon. So we are on day 3 of our budget hearings. We have to this point gone through 5 of our departments, 5 of 16 presentations that will be given to you. So today, plan for the next few hours is to go through the Public Works Department. They'll be first on the agenda with Gary Stockhoff. Then we will move to our National Areas Parks and Events with Jesse Ott. And then we'll finish up with Darren Nichols and the Community Development Department. So as always, I will kind of jump in and give a overview in most all the departments in terms of the budget. And then certainly the director will come in and give a little bit more information in terms of the programs, the various things great things that they do with the dollars that are appropriated to them. And then of course we'll work. Gary and I will probably double team this a little bit as it relates to some of the policy packages. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into Public Works unless there's any questions. Okay. Sure, my remote was working earlier. Oh, there it is. So I'll apologize. I'll probably be looking a lot this way today. I did not bring my glasses, so my sight is failing me here a little bit. So I'll be looking at the screen a little bit more. So just to start off with a quick overview of the Public Works Department, this is a $70.7 million budget. So this is by far one of the largest that we've seen so far, one of the largest in the county. That is the level that's proposed again as part of our current service level calculation. That is right now about 1% above what was the previous adopted level. So you can see clearly from a total standpoint, it's not a significant increase in any way. The department is asking for additional almost $420,000. And in addition, like with all departments, we're applying a vacancy factor, and that brings us to a total of $71.1 million after you make those applications. So again, a very, very small increase, didn't change it much at 1%. Their total vacancy factor is, and this is a little bit different with the other departments that we have talked about so far. The vacancy factor for Public Works is just applied to their internal services component, which is primarily funded by resources. We do not apply this to the road fund in any way. Those are dedicated resources. We could, but certainly that would just be money that would be sitting. And so we want to make sure that those dollars are at least available for use. So this is only an application towards those particular programs. It's a relatively small amount, $248,000. Is what we're looking at. And that's been on an average about a 7.8% is what they've seen in vacancy factor over the last 6 years. Some of the primary budget drivers, again, as I've said before, I'm not going to bore you with all of the typical things that we see with the PERS rate, the health insurance. I'll be talking a lot about that on the last day when we get into some of the specific financial service funds around health insurance and the impact of PERS. But I can mention that they will be looking to add a 1.65 FTE. Gary will talk a little bit more of that. Some of that will be offset with some report programming of cost. I think this was something that come up actually in the first day where we said that part of the facilities team will be looking to change their contracted services for custodial work to actual employees. So you'll get a chance to ask your question that you had brought up from day one. I think one of the big pieces that we will talk about, and again, reflecting back to day one, where we talked about enterprise funds and some of the trends that we have seen. We talked about the health center, but we also talked about some of our standard enterprise funds. In this case, we have the fleet is one of those external funds. And so there is a proposal that we are putting forward for a reserve fund. And that's a little bit different than what we have seen in other programs, but we'll give you a little bit of background on why and what the plan is, and talk a little bit more specific about that. So again, that's one of the drivers that we have put in place. And then in terms of just looking at some of the line items as it relates to changes, the materials and services mostly driven by about a 5.5% increase in our inflationary rate. We are seeing some reductions in some one-time expenses. So, Calapooya was a big part of this last budget in terms of the remodeling. So those are one-time expenses that we're no longer seeing. Oh, I should mention the last piece too. It doesn't show up very well there on the screen, but in terms of the material, there is increase in transfers related to the payment of debt service. So this is more starting to kick in relation to the debt service payment on the Calapooya building. So categorically, not one of the differences in this particular pie chart that you don't see in others. Most of the time I'm saying the biggest driver is your personal service cost, staffing, and certainly Public Works has 49.10 FT and asking for some additional FT. But the big driver and the biggest portion of their cost is materials and supplies. Obviously, with particularly with the road division and a lot of their acquisition of the materials that they need for roads, for ensuring safety to the public. That's a big cost and expense that they incur. So that's clearly one of our largest items that you see in the budget for the next period. Again, just as I mentioned, there will be additional 4.65 FTE that's requested, and that will be added to the current 49.10. So my favorite, as you know, the pie charts. This one's getting a little bit more animated here in terms of the various sources. So the Public Works has a variety of different funds that go to support it. The biggest that we have is the road fund. And overall, I think the important note with the Public Works is everything that you see here is dedicated resources. So these are resources that come to a particular fund dedicated specifically for public works purposes. So we can't take the dollars and do whatever we want to. Traditionally, that would have been 100% is what we would have normally seen. But the big thing is there's the general fund reserve investment that we're making. So that's the reason you're at 99.8. Again, the road fund, the largest share of resources, 47%, mostly driven from our vehicle fuel tax and transportation grants. And I think you'll see a lot of, there's some infrastructure proposals and some projects that Gary will talk about and Laura, if necessary, about some of the investments that we're being able to make with some of those resources in this upcoming biennium. 27% of the resources is from what's called our intragovernmental service fund. So this is primarily our facilities area in terms of the dollars that come in through the URR and the collection of those. And then, of course, using that to pay for the facilities costs, which again includes debt service and a variety of other maintenance needs for the facilities across the county. We also have dollars in the intragovernmental fleet through our internal fleet for replacement cost. I think this was something that was instituted several bienniums back, but again, the ability to collect dollars so that we have a replacement fund for the vehicles once they've aged out, they've gotten to the point there's dollars available to do that. So that is one of our intragovernmental funds as well. And then, mostly the remaining budget is our special transportation funding that, again, driven mostly from ODOT for our Benton area transit program that we are to contract out and provide services. It also includes some of our STIF dollars that are put out to various projects around the county. So that's sort of in a nutshell, some of the revenue sources that we see. So breaking this down functionally, like I said, this is not a big budgetary increase from an overall standpoint. But when you kind of peel it back a little bit to see kind of where some of the changes are, I think a couple notes, facility services internal, you can see the current service levels down 33%. Proposed budget is a 34% decrease. And that's primarily driven again, because in the last biennium, you had a lot of costs associated with the Calapooya building remodel. So those have been phased out of the budget. And so that's why you see a decrease in that area. Another one that I think, small but important, because this is going to come back when I present my department. The department administration, you can see the current service levels reduced by 19%. So one of the things that we're very grateful for from Public Works and both the health department had participated in the centralization of the financial services department. And a lot of those staff that are now part of the financial services that we have kind of moved into a centralized approach, they were in these departments before. So when you see the large increase in financial services from the in the next when you get to our department, remember this, there is also some decreases that you'll see. You'll see the same thing in the health services administration when you get to it, because that's where a lot of the again, staffing came from that related to that. Fleet services, the external piece, again, that's down 29%. A lot of that's driven primarily because what they do in the external fleet is they get resources oftentimes from external partners to buy vehicles. And so that does fluctuate a little bit. There was a pretty high volume of that in the last biennium, but there are times where we may have to do supplementals to this particular budget if there is a large volume, because those, you can imagine, buying vehicles will take up a lot very quick. But that's one of the big pieces as it relates to the external component. Let's see, engineering surveying, again, there's another one that I think is important to point out, 56% increase. As I mentioned, we've seen kind of a large contingency build in relation to the road fund with a lot of the dollars that have been coming from the state. I think that there is more of an effort this coming biennium to put some of those into some projects. Again, Gary will speak to some of those under the engineering survey. I think there's also been challenges in terms of some of being able to implement certain and perform some of the work. COVID certainly hasn't helped in terms of that throughout. So I think, again, there's that has, while you're seeing a budgetary increase related to that, a lot of that is from accumulation of resources that we've had. So I think that's kind of just the general overview from a budgetary standpoint. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Stockhoff, who's now going to kind of take you through the various components that I had just described, and then we'll get into goals and policy packages.
Okay. Oh, it is afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Gary Stockhoff, again, Public Works Director. And I think this is the real quick org chart of how we're set up in Public Works. And we really haven't changed much FTE wise in a while. And even the ones that you see this year, I'll talk a little bit more later, but and explain those. It really is still just status quo for the most part. And I think we try to hold tight where we can so that we're not expending more revenues than we're bringing, because even though we have the state gas tax, the road fund, it is also challenged, and we have to be very careful how that is expended. So we try to project ahead and make sure we're not overshooting the mark. So if you go, so I'll just go through the kind of the various departments real quick. So administration, I think the biggest change that we've had starting into this biennium is that Debbie Wine retired after 36 years of running Public Works, or I mean, being in Public Works. And that's been some big shoes to fill. And we've got a great new admin and doing that. But also, of course, community development moved out, and we shared receptions at the front, 0.35 us, 0.65 them. So when they come up, you'll see 0.35 in their budget to make a whole person, and we needed 0.65 to make a whole person. But that really is just the front person, the front desk person that is there. The other one that you'll see, and we'll talk more about that, is facilities, and also in fleet, where we've added some folks. But here, I think, and you'll see this common as we go through and our challenges, and as we look forward, it really is succession planning, and how are we going to keep everything floating once, we get 4 to 9 years down the road, because we will have several retirees coming in. But one thing that we do admin a lot is working with our other agencies around, the state. We impact a lot of departments internally as well. So we kind of have to navigate a lot of different folks and different needs. And we're seeing that right now as we go through the courthouse and the DA and all things that are part of that and how we manage that. So, I mean, it's exciting. It makes the day go fast, but we also have to sometimes not think like engineers as well, which is really hard sometimes. If we go to, excuse me, engineering and surveying is one of our divisions. This is under the county engineer, Laurel Byer. And Laurel does a great job of overseeing this group. Rick mentioned before that we had some balances built up, and a lot of that came from COVID because we couldn't get the projects out. So the funds kind of got backed up. The project that we had to get out last year was the new Hubbard Bridge, and that is open and functioning, and that was the big one. But this year, commissioners, if you haven't had a complaint about Spring Hill, I'm not sure that you're checking your emails or other stuff. We had intended on doing Spring Hill last year, and again, just kind of ran out of funding and ran out of stuff. We needed to get North Gibson Road done as well, Gibson Hill Road done. So those are the ones. But this year, I think Spring Hill goes out to bid next week, right, Laurel? And we've also got another couple of little projects, but that will be a big project that we have to get out, and Spring Hill will be rebuilt for the most part. And so that's one of the ones that's going to cost a lot of money. We're getting ready to also get Chapel Drive done there in Philomath. And of course, we're still working on the 53rd and Country Club intersection improvement. That'll probably be next year. And then a project that's near and dear to Commissioner Malone's heart, the Corrales to Albany Path. We know that the southern part of that from basically Pilkington to Merloy is set for probably early next year. We're doing that one in conjunction with ODOT, who will be widening the road this summer there in that same section. The other sections of the path are in differing stages. And obviously, if we get federal money or any kind of money, then we'll do what we can for those projects out in there. The state road fund that we get, it's very prescriptive in that we can really only spend it in the right of way or in projects that are related to right of way. So for instance, here a while back, we've been able to upgrade our fleet equipment a lot, and that was an eligible cost. And we found ourselves that we were running baling wire and duct tape and trying to keep stuff together. But Rich has been, and Keith have been very good about acquiring, new dump trucks, new road grader. We have a new striping truck coming. We ordered a paver last week. So, I mean, we're just all kinds of good stuff coming our way. And it was needed because the importance of, and I'll talk about the road section, is that we maintain the infrastructure that we have. And it was becoming very problematic trying to do that with some of the equipment that we had.
Mower, don't forget about the new mower.
Oh, and the new mower. Oh, that thing is so cool. Yeah. If you've not seen it, come out, we'll show you our new mower. And the interesting side note there is that we're the first one to have that mower in this area. And now we have other agencies coming down and doing tours and looking at that. So we're kind of, I don't say we're going to get a break on something, but hopefully we'll get something that for helping them sell stuff. But we're making progress, and that I think is important, that the road fund is able to use that, but we can't go spend it on other stuff that's not road related. And I'll talk another one here in a minute when we get to fleet about our new fuel station. Okay. Again, this is Rich Spofford as our road manager. Rich came right after I did back in the summer of 2019. He joined us and has done a remarkable job of refocusing our business plan on taking care of what's in the right of way and doing the maintenance work and the activities, ditch cleaning, trimming and limbing and bridge work. And again, COVID really did throw us a curveball there, but we've been able to do that. We've modified how we look at road surfaces and what we use chip seals for or what we don't use them for. And that's helped us stretch the funds that we have. And again, it's enabled us to upgrade our fleet, which was needed desperately. And he is doing a great job. And again, we've not increased the size of his staff since we've gotten here. In fact, we still have, I think, 2 vacant positions now, and it's been tough to recruit for those. But yet, I think we've been able to maintain and keep things going. Not that the rainy weather doesn't throw us off, or we still have one road grader that is getting a little long in the tooth. And so if it breaks down, that hampers how we can go about doing our gravel road maintenance program. But again, Rich keeps moving things forward. And again, that was the focus that I wanted to really highlight in the notes that I put in there, and that we did kind of change back to doing construction projects, which I think the crews sort of had fun doing those, but it wasn't our primary item, which was to maintain what we have. And again, succession planning there as well. That'll be, again, a common theme as we go through this, is that in the next 4 to 9 years, really all of myself and my managers will be able to retire. And right now, there's no clear path for anybody to step in and take our spots behind us. And, you know, there's some really unique challenges that come up, and we have to be able to do that. And there's some great folks within the organization that could. So that's where we have to kind of work with HR and others to make sure we've got folks that are going to be able to step in behind us. Special transportation. Oh, go ahead.
I would like to just interject and say that I was out at a community meeting last week and got high praise for the quality of some of our gravel roads south of Philomath. So your team is doing a good job, Rich. Thank you.
Note that, please. Special transportation. So special transportation, this is Benton Area Transit, or BAT. As we rebranded it, I think 2 years ago, at the direction of the board. It is, right now, our vendor is Dilabus. In fact, I have a meeting this afternoon with regard to the new contract, and hopefully we'll have a new contract in place this summer for them. But this is a program that the funding comes from the state, the State Transportation Improvement Fund, STIF monies. It's actually much cleaner now. The legislature last time, they combined the funds together. And so we really have just one funding source. They require us to go through and do projects. We did that. I think, board, you approved those last January, I think this past January, which then goes to the state's budget and gets put into the whole program for the next 2 years. A lot of that is to operate the various programs that we do, which are demand response, which is the service taking elderly and disabled folks to doctors or employment. We have ADA that we support Corvallis with. We have our contract services for developmental disability. And then we have our Coast to Valley and our 99 Express. Those are all Benton Area Transit routes, different clients, different services, but they're all kind of under special transportation. We've got the budget set. We have a few projects that we'll be looking at as we get into the next thing. Buying buses is really our big one right now. And that is a real challenge because the supply chain is such that we had a new pilot program that would have taken the bus 99W from McMinnville to Junction City. That was approved the last biennium. And we had a bus order in for 12 to 14 months, I believe. And vendor came back and said, we don't even make these now. And so we've had to drop back, go to another route, and try to figure out how to, acquire the right bus. And the state kind of tells us what kind of bus we need to get. So that's a challenge. We have another opportunity coming up here through, I think, our federal group. We have for electric vehicles, electric charging, which is probably something later on in my goals. Trying to find a vendor that does electric buses in a timely fashion, or even the smaller rigs. Again, very problematic, along with the charging station. So it's great to have this money, but we have a challenge of when can we get them and where do they go? One of the things we're working on right now as part of our goals is to identify where we could put charging stations, here, course, right now, all the Dial-A-Bus rigs are over at Sunset, and we have a project for that to put in security gate fences and electric charging. So it's just a matter of when and how and trying to pull that all together, but it is exciting. And of course, in the transit thing right now, finding drivers, especially ones with commercial driver's license, it's rough. It is rough. In fact, Corvallis still has, they can't provide their weekend ADA service because they can't find drivers. So it's a real challenge. So, but that's exciting that we have these opportunities before us, and I think you're only going to see more as we go on. Fleet services. And this is one where Rick might have to help me out a little bit here, because we've had, as you commissioners, you know, we've had some challenges over the years. I believe that we're definitely tracking in the right direction, and we've got things that have been put in place that we've set ourselves up. COVID for sure did not do us any favors in fleet. But you'll see that this is an area where we've got this reserve. We've got a good group of mechanics, but as with anything, you know, it's personnel. It's being able to get folks in the door. We have a lot of clients. So that's not an issue. In fact, we have a backlog now that's probably kind of dangerously more than we like it to be. But it's a good dilemma to be in. But we do have we have continuing challenges at fleet. But I guess before I get into that, we've also had some successes. One is we're very close. In fact, Keith this morning met with the state fire marshal, and I hope that our new fire or our new fuel system has been certified or will be soon, and fuel will be delivered sometime next week. And so hopefully we're getting very close to actually being able to use our new fuel facility. And that is something that's been in the works for a very, very long time, very long time. As Rick mentioned, we continue to help other agencies acquire equipment. In fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Keith just helped the city of Corvallis buy a new fire truck or order one. If you're curious about how much those run nowadays, a cool $1 million is what a new fire truck costs. So, and who knows when that'll get here, but the order's been placed. So what you'll see in this year's budget for fleet is we've actually asked for a new mechanic, because as we get in, that's more billable hours, and it helps us get that revenue coming in. It's a conditional one. As we've gone through, we've raised our rates. Over the last few years, we've gone from about 105 an hour to, I think we're 143 coming up. And we're looking at provisions of, instead of having it only go up every 2 years, that we would come back midway and look at increasing it again. To give you a point of reference, every year Keith goes out and does a poll of all the local vendors and folks that would do the same work that we do, or just kind of get an idea. Their average this year was 151, I think. Or 157. So we're still well below the average of the local folks that we would have to contract with. And I think that's beneficial in that we're able to help some of the smaller agencies to do work that they would probably not be able to get done other places. But we have been playing catch up. And so I think that has added up over time as well as to why we're there. But, you know, Rick got here and we've been able to kind of look at the model, check out the model. Not that we still need to look at how we assess the split between internal and external, and, you know, keep working on that. And it's something that we would have done when we first initiated the model, almost 4 years ago, I guess, if not for COVID, because that again threw everything to where it just went on hold until this whole time. So like I said, we're working in a positive direction, but we still have a budget challenge. And some of that is also making sure that we've got the mechanics working the hours they need, that we're charging the right amount, doing the right splits. But we're making, I think, huge strides in getting that stabilized. Is that a good way?
I just have a couple clarifying questions. So you said that moving forward, the rate is still 143? And will
Yes.
be, okay.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that COVID didn't help the situation with fleet. Could you clarify what some of those impacts were? Was it just on personnel or?
It was personnel, because we had COVID, we had folks out for extended periods of time. And so that meant there was no hours being billed. We had COVID leave, which we had to cover. It also, fewer equipment came in. And actually, we, even up until last year, we were still kind of having COVID challenges with folks having to stay out and be gone. And of course, then the inflation hit, and that also didn't help matters either, because now all of a sudden, we not only didn't have people there, but we had these costs that just went through the roof. So we weren't able to do that, to keep up.
Madam Vice Chair, if I might just add real quickly, I think, obviously this is a model that's built on, to Gary's point, you got to have your mechanics in place to be able to get those billable hours up to the point that you break even, cover your costs. So clearly, COVID, having people in and out a lot really had a huge impact. I think you'll see a graph here later into the presentation where you can see that there was a real dip in terms of the number of average hours and what they needed to get to. Now, of course, we're hoping to be able to see, they have a full staff, and then if there's additional one, you can get up to average those hours to a point that it would bring the program to the break even. So, but we'll speak a little bit more about that when we get to the policy package.
Thank you. And then I wanted to highlight too, we recently found out that our fleet ranked number 4 out of 100.
Yeah.
In the 100 best fleets in America.
Yes,
So-
and that actually was, last year we were 9th. So again, I think it speaks to where we're headed and the great progress we've made from where we were at and trying to do a lot of this. One of the other things too is that when I first got here, probably the first 2 or 3 years after that, we had a heck of a time finding mechanics, had a lot of retirees. Again, the board stepped up, increased the rates to pay for those folks. And so that helped us attract great, mechanics. And we have confidence that, when we are able to go and put out for this one, we'll get another very qualified candidate. And I should say that's $143 an hour, just to be clear, that's what the rate is that we would charge. Right now, we're at 127. So you can see that was a big jump.
And then you said the market was 157.
I think that's the average, yeah.
Thank
And if it goes up again, an average of 5 to 6%, we kind of know where next year's going to be for them and where we'll be as well. Yeah. So.
I had a couple. Okay, the $143 an hour will go into effect July 1st.
Correct.
And I'm second the notion of revisiting. What do I do on this? Yes, top 500 is $5. Is that better? Okay. You give me new equipment, I don't know how to work it. So I think, especially in the environment we're in, revisiting fleet rate annually makes sense. In that, so we don't get behind or surprised. And you mentioned electric charging stations. Would Public Works be the one handling those decisions, and would that be part of your empire?
Well, we'll coordinate those, but I mean, obviously working with Sean and sustainability and a lot of others to where those facilities will be. In fact, Paul and Jen Brown last week met with, I think, Pacific Power, and they toured several of our sites to assess what it's going to take for them, Pacific Power, to actually bring up and have enough power there to do these charging stations. So for instance, the charging stations that we'll need at Sunset for buses are ginormous. I mean, these because they have to be quick charging, they have to, these larger ones, so we'll need at least 3 of those there at Sunset to do the electric vehicles that we have at Sunset. So, and sometimes the power source that's there isn't sufficient. In fact, I think even for this building, we'd have to upgrade if you wanted to put in just a few charging stations for the public or staff, or however we decide we want to configure these electric charging stations. Part of these components are the grants that we see involve public access. And I don't know, we as the county as a whole have talked about how we want to strategize our electric charging quite yet. I mean, it's still pretty new and there's a lot of opportunities out there, but so I don't know about my Empire Commissioner, but we'll try to get everybody together and so we can come up and decide how best to do it for the county. Yeah.
Well, and I think another wrinkle with the electric charging, I can see a budget impact shifting, who's paying for the power compared to gasoline or diesel fueling that we're set up to do the charging on that, but or billing on that, but going to electric seems like that might have some budget implications in the future.
It could, and a lot of that is if we put, they call them dumb stations. There's really no way to collect that. You could just hook up, charge, and not pay anything. But if we do the smart stations, which then really are more web-based, and you can have, they need an account, but then we need an administrator to oversee it, and yet it is something that I think that we would look at to set up. But it's again, we have to now bring in IT and how we want to do that and set it all up. But those are the options that we just haven't gotten into the weeds yet on.
I know that when Lincoln School built their new building, the first couple of years, their charging station there was free to the community and it was very well used. Now they are part of one of the networks of charging companies. And so I think all of that administration is taken care of by one of those third-party companies.
Yes. But we have to pay for that.
Yes, there's a
an
fee.
admin fee.
It's
So
not
that's where
free.
we have to,
Yeah.
Well, one more question concerning fleet, and seemed like a year ago there were some conversations with OSU and their fleet, and but there aren't any opportunities for cooperation or collaboration with those folks.
That's the microphone
Meeting adjourned.
Yeah, well said, Commissioner. We had one point had talked about more of a regional approach with OSU, and we're kind of moving down that track. And then they came back and said, we're not really going that direction anymore. We also had a brief discussion, oh boy, probably over a year ago with actually Corvallis, the same kind of idea of regionalization, and really nothing has happened on that idea either. So right now it's kind of like we're here and we're just assuming that we'll be our fleet and take care of the things that we need to take care of here.
On the regional approach is the idea to increase our scale so that we can have more flexibility and have a little larger group of mechanics to work on various kinds of equipment that come our way.
That would be the idea, yeah. So like if, say we were back to OSU and they had folks that could do sedans that, so that maybe they'd focus on that. We've got the folks for the fire trucks and the bigger rigs, and we do that. And then buses are a different story. But like right now, we also work with Corvallis School District to do their buses and some others. And so, I mean, if that were the case, and we got back to our regional approach, we would say, well, how do we want to divvy this thing up and best serve all of the agencies that are involved?
Okay, thank you.
building maintenance and operations. So Paul let me know early this morning that he had tweaked his back and he's probably home on a heating pad somewhere. So I think
It's contagious.
It's contagious.
yes. But here again, I don't know what more I could probably say that's not already here, but this is where Paul did an assessment, I will say, of our custodial services. And as he looked at that, those rates, those costs have gone up substantially over the last 2 to 3 years. And sometimes we have quality issues with that. So as Calapooya came on, we know we're going to have a new courthouse and DA and you know, maybe others. Again, we have to look at how we do our custodial model. And he priced it out, and for what we can reduce in the custodial contract, it's almost a wash. Rick's been creative and, you know, coming up with those 3 new positions, but then they're in our control and we can send them out and take care of the custodial stuff in a much more efficient way. And so that's part of our big policy package, is probably the biggest one. But Paul did all that. But again, he has got it kind of running on a pretty good machine right now with the areas that are in the URR, the uniform rental rate. And I'm not quite sure what we can go on more about that, other than, you know, we're bringing on more space, so that will create a challenge for his groups to continue to take care of, both custodial wise, but also then just building tech, that we have to make sure we have the technicians that can take care of the new facilities. Now, in theory, the new facilities will be maybe a little less needy for some work, but you know, we'll still need more folks for that. But that's probably another story for another biennium. So
My knowing is we're not going to lose Pedro here, right? The Calapooya building.
we're not
We're not going to lose Pedro here, right?
no, I think he's pretty much, yeah.
Okay, that's good.
You like Pedro?
Yes, and we have had no quality issues with his work, so.
We love Pedro. He has done an excellent job. And that kind of, Commissioner, is very indicative. We don't have our full-time folks at Avery. We have the contract, and I will say there's sometimes it's a wee bit lacking. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Kind of talked about this one a little bit before. Our goal for the Thriving Communities Initiative, this is our charging stations. And obviously trying to get together and figure out where we're going to put the charging stations in and how to have them set up to best fit what the commissioners and everybody, you know, kind of need and their vision of how we want to do this for the public or the employees or our fleet. You know, we don't have a big electric fleet right now, back again, because we just can't find the vehicles. We did order the first all electric vehicle back, well, a long time ago. I can't remember. When was it, Keith?
It's been about 14, 15 months.
We ordered a F-150 Lightning, and I'm not sure they're even making them right now because they were having battery issues. And so, you know, here we try to do that, but we can't get the vehicles here. So I think right now the focus really is on maybe employees, if they have their own electric vehicles, and then how could we blend that into then the public? And I'll echo Commissioner Ogero's statement about being used by others. We had one at Avery and it was always being used by somebody from across the street. So, you know, then if one of our people wanted it, was never available. So this is a big one for us, and just navigating, I'll say, the federal regulations that come with these funding sources, or the state, or how we're going to get these implemented. But I think between Jen and Sean and Paul, they've really got a pretty good handle on how and where to go. The sheep farm access, this is one that's been hanging around a while. We're almost there, commissioners. I think we've got a conditional use permit that we need from community development, but the plans are ready to go. We've got OSU signed off on it. So hopefully, if it ever dries out this summer, we'll be able to get up there. And for the folks that aren't familiar with this, we are putting in an emergency access route from the OSU Sheep Farm Barn over to the end of Ponderosa, the city of Corvallis. And that's been in the works for almost 2 years now. We received funding from the Corvallis Foundation, I think. We received money from Senator Gelser, and I think there's some other monies involved. So it's been a big lift for a lot of different folks, but we're almost there. And that will then give the Oak Creek neighborhood 3 new access routes that weren't there 5 years ago. One was an existing route up through McDonald Forest and then through Balta Farm. That was an existing route that we got agreements with all those parties, and now we'll have the sheep farm. So that's a big lift that we're hopefully going to finally have done. That'll be a good one.
Gary, on the evacuation routes, and I don't necessarily need it right now, but I know there's a issue with, you'll have a gate. How to, who has access to the keys, or, you know, it's locked, but you want, once every 6 months, people need access, and how does it work? I mean, and I know that can be a little complicated, and I'd love to know if you've made any progress on a smart gate or whatever's.
You know, Commissioner, I don't know if we have, and kind of up to this point, we like to leave the access to the gates entirely under the sheriff's control. And whether they're going to open it up or not. And we kind of hesitated moving away from that, but, you know, I can sure talk to the sheriff or Brian to see if there's any other thinking on that right now. But, you know, we've had a couple, for instance, that go across, say, a private timber company's land, and we have to be very careful of opening that up. And then there's liability issues and safety issues. And so right now it's the sheriff, but I am more than happy to ask about it again.
Great, thank you.
And I think this last one here is, again, we have the need to repair, rehab some existing paths. We had money last biennium for that, and we ended up having to use it for another project. We had it for, in this one, we had to end up using it for the fuel upgrade, but we do know that we need to have these redone. And then, of course, once we get them rehabbed, we would once again ask the city if they felt like they could take it over. I think one of them we would keep, but another one we would ask if the city would take it over now that it's repaired and in good shape. But a lot of this depends on, again, other funding and the CIP and stuff like that. But getting back to, this is getting people out of cars and making it where they can bike and walk out there. Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gary. So I'm going to cover the last several slides of Gary, and I'm going to tag team this a little bit. I know we're running pretty close to time, so we'll try to make sure that we stay within the framework of the agenda. So what we're going to speak to now is the policy option packages. So as a summary, there's a $419,000 recommended increase, which includes 4.65 FTE. So we mentioned this earlier, and again, Gary did a great job in covering a lot of these things. So as I go through them, should make it a little bit easier, because he did, like I said, a really good job of covering that in his presentation. In total, the Public Works Department asked for $667,000. And that was in the form of the 3 packages that are in front of you. All 3 were recommended by the county administrator for approval. The difference is the $248,000 of vacancy factor that we applied. So again, this is similar to all the other departments. So that's how you get to the $419,000 increase. So that's just from the standpoint of how much, or in terms of the resources to kind of cover the packages themselves. Like I said, some of this Gary has talked about already. The first package was specific to administrative support capacity. So as he said, community development and public works shared a position at the Avery building. They had the 0.35 piece, and community development had the 0.65. So what you have here is asking to get that position to a full-time status, because that's what they need there at the Avery building to continue to provide that important support. You'll see the exact opposite of that when we get to community development. They'll ask for a full-time FTE, but it'll be a 0.35 request. So that in total, this is a $173,000 request. It all comes out of the road fund, specifically, so dedicated resources. So that was approval to move to help the administrative efficiency. The next piece, again, as Gary alluded to, this is the facilities and custodial upgrade. So this is a net increase of 61,000. While we're establishing 3 FTE, we're also reducing contracted services. So there's a little bit of a cost, a little bit of differential, but again, from a cost benefit standpoint, I think Gary would say, and his team would say, that the services improvements that you will get with this investment is well worth that $61,000. This is a internal service fund. So basically it essentially is paid as a central cost allocation in relation, or part, I should say, part of the URR in relation to covering that cost. So the last piece, again, we kind of dove into this a little bit. So there's kind of 2 parts. This is the fleet request. So just to kind of provide some context. So we have with our fleet, we have internal fleet and we have the external fleet. In the world of accounting, internal fleet is an internal service fund. Essentially, basically, it's paid by the cost of the department's charges that are paid. And then we have an external fund, and that has to, by an accounting structure, be an enterprise fund. So basically a business type fund. And so the dollars that are part of the enterprise fund are those that are earned or paid from our partners. So many ways here, when you have an enterprise fund, it's the closest you get to a business type relationship in the world of in government. So as Gary has already talked about, and I'll share here shortly in terms of the graph, COVID certainly did not do any favors in relation to the production piece of fleet. So the model that we have is relatively, it's complex, but yet relatively simple in that you have to be able to earn an average amount of billable rate hours to be able to meet the bottom line. So it's essentially a complex program that you go through where you're saying, okay, this is my cost. This is the cost that I have to cover based on our estimates. And then you go through a process to be able to determine how many hours a mechanic would have to average in terms of billable hours to meet the bottom line. I think, again, it's been a struggle to get to the number of billable hours. We know that in the previous biennium, the 1921 biennium, the commissioners may remember that we had to use some of our ARPA dollars in terms of being able to make that program whole. It was close to $500,000 that we were needing to invest in that. This particular biennium, while we're still reviewing, and obviously we're not until the end of the biennium, there are still continued challenges that we will have to come before the commissioners to talk about this current biennium. Again, we're not to that final piece, but we do know that there is going to need to probably be some support in relation to continuing to help that particular program along. So now looking forward, which is where we're at here, is how do we best set ourselves up for success? So first, the idea is to add an additional mechanic. So that may seem a little bit counterintuitive in that, okay, well, you're losing money, but you're increasing expenses. Again, the idea here is that if you have enough mechanics to get to that average number of hours that you need, you should be able to cover that cost. So we plugged that into our model, and that's how we came up with essentially the rates and or the proposed rates, I should say, that we would need to be able to meet the bottom line. So as your financial officer, I have to always be, kind of the one always looking, okay, what are the worst case scenarios? certainly I don't think the commissioners nor I want to continue to be in a situation to where we have to essentially use general fund money to subsidize a program. So that's really what I'm trying to do here is how do we get out of that particular situation? So let me share with you a little bit of a graph here that I'll give you kind of some context to it. So again, what this is meant to do is depict the number of hours that we need to get to meet the bottom line. So all the blue that you see on the graph is the number of hours in which we have seen on a monthly basis what we have essentially billed, if you will. And it's, you know, interesting as you look through the months, you can see sort of those lower dips. But then there are three different lines that are on there. And this is kind of all related to particularly the red line and the purple line. This is related to the Mercury model. There's kind of two different sort of thresholds that said, okay, you know, if you're this high performing, that's my words, but you would be, you know, average hours would be at that particular level. The purple line is more of the, I guess, achievable type line that is put in place in relation to, and it is part of what is recommended in terms of our model. The yellow line that you see there is that's really sort of based on our history and thinking of our history in terms of, okay, if we didn't have COVID, to be honest with you, that's sort of you can call that Rick's line, because that's sort of where I would see sort of the threshold that we could get to. So I say all of that because for us to be able to be financially solvent, our billable hours have got to be at that purple line. And that we've got to average that purple line. So all those blue dots have to get up to that point. You can see certainly there's some work that needs to be done to be able to get that. I know Keith and his staff, they're hardworking, and I know they're going to do everything they can to make sure that they get to that. And I think he would also say, if he were sitting here, that additional FTE will be critical in helping him in terms of meeting that. At the same time, you know, again, I'm always having to look at it from the standpoint, I don't want to have to come before the commissioners again and say, hey, you know, we didn't meet it. And so I'm trying to think of, if we were at the yellow line, what's the difference? What's the difference between purple and yellow? And that's really where you come up with this $150,000 reserve idea. So what we would essentially be doing is putting, I guess you could call it a backstop within the particular program to mitigate the risk of, this is sort of what we've seen in the past. This is what our aspirational, where we want to get to. I think, you know, again, I would say, you know, look at those blue lines and see where they're at now. Again, you would have to average the yellow line just to get to that place of, all right, $150,000 would sustain us. If we don't get to the yellow line, then that $150,000 is not enough. And so I just need to be a real honest and straightforward with all of you in terms of that. I think that this is, again, I think I support my colleague Gary and Keith in terms of really trying to make a push and effort to get this program to the place it needs to be. I think that we have to always balance, you know, what we charge, obviously. You know, at the same time, you know, you got a private sector out there that also does this work. So, you know, what is that right balance in terms of what you charge? And then, you know, and sometimes you ask the question, at what point does the private sector do that? So those are all things I think are important. I put to you as the budget committee as, you know, things to maybe think about, ask questions. I think as a recommendation from the county administrator and the interim county administrator, we talked a lot about this. And again, I think there's a lot of effort around trying to make this a model that's sustainable long term, excuse me. But we got our work cut out. So I always like to joke with Keith a little bit, you know, because I'm always the kind of the bad guy saying that, you know, right, you know, are we really going to meet that? And I'm the first one I told him is that, you know, I'll be the first to celebrate, you know, prove me wrong, get to that purple line. And I believe that he'll work hard to try to do that. But again, like I said, I want to try to mitigate the risk as your financial officer. So with that, that is the three policy packages before we kind of, I guess, have Gary finish up with challenges and opportunities going forward. I would ask if there are any questions in relation to these investments.
Yeah, on the chart, on the left-hand column, and it goes 700, 800, 900, is that hours?
Yes,
And then at the bottom, it says yellow is 1,400 hours and purple.
I know it gets a little confusing because the Mercury model is based on a average, and that's what those little, at the very bottom, you have the 1,400 and the 1,551. I can't see it very well, but those are basically what the hours are from a annual standpoint. And then what we do is we put this into a monthly type model so that you can see this is where we went. There's a little mathematical formula that goes into that, but that essentially is the threshold that we'd have to meet on a monthly basis. So I know a little confusing. I apologize. Oh, this is not even already close to 1,400 hours, but it's the way the model is set up. That's for the achievable component.
But the number we really care about is the 800 to 900.
That's right.
Range.
Yeah, that's what we want to see. If we could average that on an annual basis, if you could see those blue lines kind of dancing up and down, either I'd be happy with the yellow line, but also the purple line. If they danced up and down on that, then that's ultimately where we need to get.
And I guess how into the next fiscal year, how soon should we get a report how it's shaping up, and how much time do you want to get things in place before we look at the chart again?
So commissioners, I would say if this is a recommendation that the budget committee deems to go forward, I think this is something we and Gary and I both agree, we need to be talking about continuously. I think it's something we have to watch. I think one of the things that Gary pointed out is that with the increase in rates that we put forward, what is that going to do for the external customers as it relates to, continuing to be involved in the program? But I think I would say we need to be watching this closely because, again, I don't want to be, we're not in a position as a county to be able to, we have a lot of things we need to do in the next 2 years, and I don't want to have to be coming before you with a budget hole. And so I think this is something we do need to look closely at. We've had, the last 4 years, obviously a big part of that COVID has an impact, and I agree, but those 4 years we have been in a deficit situation.
Go ahead, Commissioner Osho.
I was just wondering, with respect to our fleet service, especially given our ranking, I'm assuming that we do surveys of our customers and the customer satisfaction is high. And what's our time turnaround? Is our time turnaround better than it is for general market? Is that part of the reason?
It is, yeah. For a dealer here in town, we are much quicker, and we prioritize first responders.
Mhm.
So, if we had a sheriff car go down and they had to take it down to one of the locals, it might be a lot longer, but we do try to get those turned around as soon as we can.
Road.
And I will also say just real quick, the purple line, actually the 1,500 and some hours is something that Keith talks to his technicians about and has that as a goal in their performance plan, that this is the goal you need to shoot for. I mean, stripping out all the holidays and vacations, sick time, that's a realistic number. And we have 2 mechanics that meet that. We've had a couple others that have had health issues. And so that's where, Rick says that it vacillates, but we are seeing that people can achieve that. Now we just need to get them all there, consistently. So.
Absolutely. And again, to Gary's point, it certainly the purple line is achievable. We've, like he said, we know mechanics meet it. We need everybody to meet it though. We need everybody to get to that point so that we can be financial, because I think even some of them are maybe even up close to that red line in some cases in terms of their efforts. So we know it's possible, but we obviously got to make sure that everybody is at that place.
This is also part of having a small shop, if just one mechanic or 2 don't meet it, then the whole fleet shop doesn't make it. So, yeah, I can understand the challenge.
That's very true, Commissioner. That goes back to, 1 or 2. I mean, we could actually take on more and you'd have it, the extra revenue coming in. So, but that's kind of, contrary to our thinking of things.
Yeah,
Um,
Go ahead.
do you know offhand how much we backfilled with the ARPA dollars last time?
Thank you. 465,000-ish.
Okay. And then do you have a chart like this for the biennium before? Maybe would that be something that you can,
Let me look into that.
if it's not,
Commissioner
it
Wise
doesn't take too
and
much time.
Yeah, see how far. One of the things is the Mercury model.
was a carryover.
I'm sorry.
Wasn't there a carryover from the, or I don't remember, yeah,
The carryover
from the previous biennium, the number, I don't know if we. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't mean to get in the weeds too much now, but
So the previous biennium for the 2019-21 biennium, that was the biennium in which we had a budget of over 465,000. So we used the ARPA dollars to pay that. And now we're in the 21-23 biennium, which this reflects. And I'll be talking to you, here in the next several weeks, probably in terms of that particular situation.
sure. And it sounds like this is I support this policy package request, but it does sound like a conversation the Board of Commissioners should have moving forward. And I would just be interested to learn more about it from the time before I was a commissioner.
Yeah,
Um,
and this is always I think as commissioners, we want to bring this before you and give you the best information up to date where we're at. At the same time, I understand there's always the benefit piece that you have to look. There are small communities that have needs, and so those kind of conversation is, what's the best way to orient the program to be able to meet those needs, but at the same time be prudent in the use of the dollars, and even discussions of, how much dollars, in some cases you do put dollars into enterprise funds. Community health centers is an example. So I think those are all discussions that will probably come before the three of you.
Another
Yeah,
question?
I want to know when the Public Works picnic is this spring, so we can talk to some of these folks.
Well, I'll have to look into that. When it stops raining.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Oh, Liz, do you have a mic?
They put me in charge of my own mic. I apologize. Just as a new person to this committee, I have a couple general questions. I want to go back to road maintenance if we could. It says the current service level for road maintenance remains essentially the same as the previous biennium. Are we on top of the road maintenance? Are we falling behind? Are we doing a great job? What are your basic feelings about that? It's a very public facing issue, so that's why I asked.
Yeah, we have struggled with getting the money that we really need, even after House Bill 2017, the costs have gone up, and trying to keep up is still an issue for us. And so just the overall payment condition index is not going necessarily the direction we want. So, and it's not just us, it's the state, it's every agency out there still struggles with not having enough money to maintain it. So that's why I go back to Rich is really doing a miracle worker job of keeping up with what we have. But clearly we have a lot of bridges that need to be redone. They're weight limited now because of these new super single trucks. And so we always look for money. And the problem is we also struggle with the money that we have, because now ODOT has taken away our fund exchange, so to speak, which is the clean money, and everything's been federalized. And that creates just some real challenges for us, because it's a lot of money to administer federal money.
Are you going to be in a position where you have to prioritize which streets are getting the attention, and how do you have a plan for that?
There is a plan. It's the payment condition index. So we try to take them as long as we can. But for instance, Spring Hill is a very good example. It's like, it's tired, it's old, enough was enough. And we're able to get to that. But we know there's others that we have to let get worse before we can get out there. And there's a balancing in that. We want to take care of the roads before they get into the bad category, because then it's way more to fix them. And so it's that balancing act of when can we do these, and how bad will they have to get before we can get to them. So
One last question on the bridge repairs. Are you dealing with any seismic issues, or are we just repairing what's there? What does that look like when you're repairing the bridges?
and I'll have to wing this. I mean, if we do a new bridge, it will be done according to the current seismic standards. But some of these, we're just rehabbing and bringing them back up so that they'll continue to function as they are. And a lot of times it depends on what kind of route they're on. If it's a primary emergency route, then surely they are going to get seismic stuff. But if it's a lesser used route, then we might not do that. One of the big challenges we have too is when we do a new bridge or a culvert, we have a lot of culverts. We have to also look at the fish friendly aspect of that. And if we have to make them and upgrade them to take care of fish, then that increases the cost as well. So then we have to prioritize, do we do 3 culverts of this size or 1 fish friendly? And yeah, it's challenging at
It's
times.
complicated. Thank you very much.
Liz. And I think we can move along unless Kurt or Chaz have any questions.
I'm okay now.
Thank you.
Finish up. Oh, I think I already talked about challenges. Sorry. Cost escalation, succession planning, and again, we really do work hard to maximize the funds that we get to get as much done as we can. So, and partner wherever we can with our surrounding agencies. It's really important that we do that.
I have just one last question, going back to fleet. These challenges have persisted at least as long as I've been with the county, so for the last 6 years, for various reasons. Keith's done a great job pulling us through this far. And my question is, do we have a plan B? And at what point will we really seriously start talking about that? Or is this additional FTE and 150,000 contingency going to carry us through the biennium? What's your feeling on that?
I think the feeling I have is it's a good plan for right now. But back to, I think Commissioner Malone asked and Rick said, we're going to monitor this. It may be monthly. I mean, because with the new software, we know how many hours are getting tracked. And so we'll just have to keep an eye on it to see if we're getting to where we need to be. Yeah. So I think plan B is if there is a plan B, it would be forthcoming depending on how, and it really comes down to hours billed for a lot of it. So
that's the trigger that will really heighten.
that's
our
a real
concern.
key indicator of that. Yeah. And again, there might be tweaks internal to percentage here, percentage there. But really, if we get the hours billed, I think that goes a long way to raising the revenue that we need.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, watching the rates and, in the past, I think we've built a rate structure that was biennial and that was the rate, but yet, we've seen huge increases each and every year. So having that flexibility to revisit the rates again, I think that's important that we build in, but I also think it's important that we collectively watch this closely and work together and determine, if we're not getting there, what is it we have to do to get us to that place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, Madam Vice Chair, ready to keep powering? Okay,
Yes,
all right. So we're going to move to natural areas, parks and events. That's a mouthful. So I'm just going to say NAPE from now on. So we got the said it. So now we got the acronym in place, and joining me is Jesse Ott, who is the Deputy Director for NAPE, and he's going to join us for the presentation here. So as always, I'm just going to jump in and provide you some highlights as it relates to the proposed budget. So the first thing I'm going to say about NAPE is they are what I call current service level budget. So you do not have any policy packages in relation to NAPE. You will have some capital improvement programs and requests that come through typically. But again, what we're speaking today is just a current service level budget. So there'll be a portion of the presentation that you typically hear that won't be within this one. So overall, 6% increase is what we're looking at. Again, we are applying a vacancy factor to NAPE. It is a relatively high vacancy factor, so I will point that out, 9.7%. I think a lot of that comes, and maybe Jesse could speak a little more than I, but you have seasonal work, I think, at times in terms of your parks, and I think that's contributed to that. I know James has talked a little bit about that with sort of his seasonal pieces on elections. And so that's one of the contributors. So this was one I would circle, from a vacancy factor standpoint, it was more, this is a higher end one, and it's not a huge budget. Well, I mean, it's a big budget, but it's certainly not in the grand scheme of things. I think it's one that we'll just have to watch closely with Jesse as we move forward. I think only a total of about 14 staff that we have within NAPE. So but all together, again, a $10.6 million budget is what we're looking at. When you apply the vacancy factor to this, the overall increase is only 3%. So a relatively small increase. Again, not anything new to share in terms of that growth. Part of the question would be, the lower growth that you see that contributes to that. I mean, we do see our personal services about 8%. It's a little bit lower as it relates to the CSL. So again, they don't have a large amount. I think they've had a lot of longtime staff within NAPE. So a lot of that could be topping out situations where you don't, you have the increases, you don't have that annual component. So you see that a lot of times in the departments. In terms of, you will note that there is a relatively large increase there for capital outlay, 82%. So I will highlight you to that. That is primarily related to our rebounding transit lodging tax. So that has really picked up a lot over the last year. Actually, we've seen that really come back from COVID pretty strongly. So part of those dollars are being programmed as it relates to capital outlay and being able to look at the master plan out of the fair and potentially acquisitions that the commissioners may be interested in pursuing. So that is going to be a critical source going into this next biennium. I think I'm excited about to see the growth of that. I think there's just a lot of great opportunities that we can look into with those resources growing. So I think that's, kind of the primary piece that is different. If you're looking at the transfers, you see a 16% decrease in that. Part of that is in relation to they do a lot of transfers in between. You're going to see here, they got a lot of different funds. They got the most diversity in terms of their funds. So they're moving dollars around in terms of making that. So that has reduced a little bit. We don't look at that, too hard. The contingency piece, that is down some to really no surprise. I mean, obviously, one of the things that we've seen, particularly in fair operations, and we'll talk about that, is during COVID, the facility rentals went way down during COVID. I think they've rebounded, but still not rebounded to the level we've seen. So there's been some reliance. So you haven't had to be able to build as much contingency as in the past. So that's one of the impacts related to that. In terms of categorical changes, so again, as mentioned, they are 14 FTEs, so not a large area, but their total personal services and materials and supplies are their two largest areas of expenses. When you put materials, supplies, and capital outlay together, that's 50% of their total budget. So again, they're small staff, but they do a lot as it relates to a lot of the maintenance when you have parks and you have the grounds, the maintenance facilities. And then also you have opportunities like with the TLT, to transit lodging tax, TLT, to be able to actually be able to invest in some of the capital outlay. That's the reason you have a higher amount in those areas. So no big shifts too much other than what I'd already mentioned on the contingency. That might be just something to circle, seeing a little bit of, less contingency because of less revenues as it relates particularly to the fair operations, but nothing at this point that is a red alert in any way. I think, again, budget appears to be relatively strong going into next year. In terms of, again, I joked with Jesse when we were talking, his funding always gets, me excited because it's very diverse. It's got all kinds of funds mixed into this. So he's got general fund. That's obviously a big portion of what goes into this, and providing the direct resources to the NAPE administration, the parks, facilities, ground maintenance, and particularly the habitat conservation program. Take a breath. The fair fund, that speaks for itself. Obviously, these are the dollars that come in for the fair itself. I think we saw a great success this last year with the fair coming back. Very excited to see that continue to move forward. So that represents approximately 40% of the resources. There are, I kind of put these two together, the cemetery operation fund and the enterprise operation funds. These are dollars that are kind of, again, sort of, I like to say mini businesses. You have the cemetery that we operate out at the Crystal Lake. That's about 1%. So the revenues there are essentially supporting the maintenance and upkeep relation to the cemetery. The enterprise operation fund, the Salmonberry campground that's out at the fairgrounds. That's a big component. I'm sorry, Benton Oaks, that's out at the fairgrounds. The campground there covers a lot of revenue sources, as well as the Salmonberry campground, but I had those two backwards there a little bit. We have the Adair Clubhouse, which is a portion of the concessions that come in terms of operations. So again, all those enterprise operations funds are pretty stable. We're not seeing any changes or anything that's jumping out too much in terms of differences, but overall that's 10%. And then they have a small portion that is a trust fund, and that's for the Bazell Memorial Forest. And these are dollars that are in trust specifically for that. We did have some others we'll speak to here that actually have been liquidated related to the Hoskins. So that is no longer part of our trust fund, but that's what the 3% represents. So one of the things, again, I always like to say, in terms of the general fund itself, the general fund portion of NAPE includes 13% of those resources in the general fund are actually dedicated. So again, 87% is discretionary revenue back to property taxes. That's the supports the overall operations of NAPE. Some of the things, and again, this is a little bit additional slide that I provided, because again, when you have a department with a variety of different types of resources, want to make sure that you're well informed in terms of things that are going on. Again, as I mentioned, the fair fund had declined in previous years. I think we saw some good recovery, but there's not a full recovery yet. I think as time goes along, we're hopefully, I know all the great things. All those great events that Jesse's been talking about that's coming to the fair here very soon. Hopefully we'll continue to grow that and get it back to the levels it was. At the same time, again, like I already said, the transit lodging tax is really taken off, and there's a lot of dollars and a lot of opportunity. And again, that's been sort of a bit of a saving grace as it relates to those dollars can be used for the fair. It is a tourist attraction, so those are dollars that can help and support. But ideally, we all want to make sure that those go towards capital outlay and being able to support the long-term master plan, which I think we're now in a position where we could really do that here going into the next biennium. Fair operation expenses related to capital repair maintenance. Again, like I said, has been shifted. A lot of that has been shifted to the transit lodging tax, as we've seen a little bit of, particularly on the fair operations, and where that comes in is the facility rentals. So again, I think that we've seen recovery from that, but it's still not back to the levels it was pre-pandemic. So need to continue to work that. And then, as I already mentioned, the trust fund is reduced and liquidated. And then lastly, again, just to kind of give you the highlights of, and this will be the segue into Jesse to kind of speak to these different areas, but just sort of as a glance, again, you've already heard me say fairground operations, that 39% area, that's a little bit of a circle that we want to, make sure that we pay attention to. We want to see that continue to recover. Everything else, relatively, stable. The 68% transit lodging tax, that's huge. That's a big increase that we've seen. So that's essentially able to fill the holes and also be able to help support other activities. But everything else is, relatively nothing jumping out in terms of a major shift away. Again, overall 6% in the current service level. So with that, I will turn it to Mr. Ott to kind of take you and walk you through their organizational structure as well as their programmatic areas.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. Okay, so yeah, you see there, we've got our org chart. There's actually 3 admin assistants that are underneath the NAEP director there. So, our department administration staff, they take all the phone calls, set people up for weddings, help plan events, and organize for our outdoor recreation program. So they are very busy taking calls for the day. And then we've got our fairgrounds and parks maintenance staff. So we've got the natural areas that we need to take care of that have a very specific, set of skills and time allocated to that. And the maintenance folks that are out there, we're kind of known for doing a lot with a little. That's something that we're kind of famous for amongst our partners with the city and OSU and some of the land trusts about how much we're able to accomplish with a small staff. All right. So department administration. So yeah, like I said, we've got a lot of buildings out there. We've got all the campground rentals down in Salmonberry coming up next week. Everything that goes on at Benton Oaks and all the OSU game days and all the camping that goes on there. So we're definitely a very busy hopping office. It takes a lot to get people set up to produce a big conference or an event or a wedding, funeral, you name it, that we do out at the fairgrounds. And same as at the parks. We get a lot of special use permits for sizable events at Bell Fountain and Adair and many of our sites. So but we're seeing a lot of really great collaboration here. With the merger, we've come up with a lot of new ideas and trying to streamline things and increase our customer service. So that's been one of those synergies where we have more capacity. In the past, if somebody that was working at the fairgrounds had something going on, there was no one there to answer the phone. So that's also created a lot of cross training that we've needed to do. And so really we need to kind of push beyond. We've been able to cross train and get everybody ready to take on the responsibilities of the day-to-day operations, but it's time to kind of take a next step forward and increase our training and get more folks out there. So the outdoor recreation programs, that's a big part of what we do. We're coming into the season. Next week, we have Natural Areas Week. And so every day of the week, we have an event going on at our parks. This year, it's going to be the Jackson Fraser Wetland for nightly bird and plant ID walks. And so that outdoor recreation program, we have a whole bunch of different programs where we'll do events out at Bazell Memorial Forest and do plant ID and all kinds of nature walks. We do our Bazell Family Mushroom Day, the outdoor recreation program, and a whole series of various events throughout the summer. And so, that's something that we're increasing our capacity for that, including the scholarships that we offer, 11 different scholarships to the Outdoor Adventures program for low-income Benton County students. And so, yeah, right now it's really just, pushing forward. We have to market and brand ourselves a lot more than we have. Lynn's done a really great job of getting us set up for the fairgrounds. And, we have a lot more work to do on getting the word out there for all the great work we do in our natural areas and parks, as well as helping to, promote more inclusion at the fairgrounds, try to increase volunteer opportunities out there and that type of thing to gain more interest in the site. Okay, grounds and building maintenance. So, we have a lot of buildings to maintain. The fairgrounds, so NAPE maintains all those buildings on our own. We're not under facilities for that. And so that's a big lift. All the electrical, plumbing, you name it out there. And so we definitely have a lot of building maintenance and a lot of deferred maintenance from over the years. The park system especially has some a lot of facilities that are falling into disrepair, quite frankly. And so even pictured here is Adair County Park. And so we're going through the master plan process right now, looking at those facilities. And, when you really take a deep dive into a master planning process, you see that we've got a lot of work to do to keep up these buildings. So that's pretty much across the system, from Hyack to North Albany. That's really what our focus is this year with our CIP requests and where we're really putting our effort. We have a lot of community members that have been waiting a long time for some of these big improvements. And, our hope is to really deliver on those projects in the coming biennium. A lot of work has done, to move our kiosks to bilingual. And so that takes time and effort. But we're moving quickly. And so, within the next biennium, we should have everything turned over to bilingual signage. We also take care of the county facility landscaping contract. So that's this building and all of those. We actually have an RFP out right now to re-up those services. And so that takes a significant amount of work as well, because all of the detailed kind of tree work, irrigation, planting, all of that stuff is still on us for all the county facilities. And lots of tree work. We've taken specific interest, in making sure that our oak grove at Benton Oaks is safe. We know that Oak Grove has a lot of issues, and so we spent a lot of time and money making sure that it's as safe as we can possibly make it. And we're doing that around the system to really kind of up our game on the tree care portion of our work. Fairgrounds operations. So things are starting to pick up, but they dropped off dramatically during COVID. And a lot of the people, for example, a lot of service organizations that used to use the county fairgrounds as a meeting place. Some of them have run into the same financial strains that we've experienced from COVID, and it's been tough to get people back. So they're starting to get up and running, but it's taken a little time. So I would suspect by the end of this summer we'd be back to normal, and hoping to really be creative, find ways to utilize as much of the space as we have, try to find ways to utilize the dirt floor Benton Arena as much as possible. We were expecting to convert that into an exhibit hall by now. And so, with that delay, we're really looking to see what can we utilize that space for? Can we increase events there until we make that change and get a improved exhibit hall and rodeo arena? The RV storage is still going gangbusters for us. That's really popular. And we have a goal to, install an automated RV dump station payment system. And part of that is because we're the only dump station in Corvallis. And we get a lot of use. And so that's another potential for lost revenue there, where we're probably not capturing nearly all of those dump fees that we should be collecting. Okay, the annual fair. So we're all set for this year. And so we've, been really meeting with a lot of people. Fair is getting more and more challenging every year. It used to be that we could make the call out for seasonal employees to help us and could offer $14 an hour, and we'd have to turn people away. Now it's difficult to find anybody that's willing to work, in the hottest of the summer months at the fair as an emergency hire, seasonal hire, extra help. And we're also seeing our service organizations really strained. And we absolutely rely on them to help run the fair. So a lot of challenges there, but we've been talking a lot about, what can we do to increase revenue? By increasing kind of the type of offerings we have, changing it up, and potentially just reducing expenditures by changing how we do concert nights and making a few tweaks to that where we could see increases of revenue. So I'm anticipating this year will be a really well-attended fair. We're already seeing numbers of folks interested higher than last year. A lot of the reports coming back from other county fair managers is that this is looking to be a year where we're really, expecting to have a lot of folks wanting to come out. And so the fair is a huge, the livestock auction that we do, brought in nearly $1 million for 4-H families last year. And that's really a big deal. The all-girls rodeo and the NRPA rodeo that we put on is really unique, especially the all-girls rodeo. That's a really unique thing we have here in Benton County. Transient lodging tax. So, this is really, the future of our fairgrounds depends on this master plan being implemented. Converting the exhibit hall, providing a new indoor arena, improving the entryway, the surfaces out there, and really making this a space that is more attractive. In the regional feasibility study that we've done, converting the exhibit hall and being able to get that project going. The feasibility study that was done would estimate that we would bring in somewhere about $1.2 million additional revenue to Benton County, about 14 additional jobs throughout the county and lodging and hospitality, if we were able to bring in some of these regional conventions and exhibits that right now we're losing to Lynn County and Lane County. So transient lodging tax, like Rick said, is doing great. We anticipate it to keep getting better for this year, and so that's really the future of the fairgrounds is that TLT and being able to implement this master plan. So the Habitat Conservation Program is still a very successful program to protect rare species in the county. Actually, not all of them are listed, but we continue to find even new rare species on some of our sites. Actually, there was a paper that just came out from some OSU students that found a very rare cad's fly out there that they think we know of only one other site in Benton County where that cad's fly exists. So, this in 2022, we won the State Land Board Award for Outstanding Wetland Project, in no small part due to the Habitat Conservation Program. And so, we're still out there at all of our sites doing plantings and reintroducing butterfly habitat, butterfly larvae. And so coming up to this summer, we'll be doing, even more planting, especially at the Cardwell mitigation sites. And so that's been a really successful program. And, we hope to go out for some more OWEB money in the near future. Okay, so all of our cemetery and enterprise operations. So these ones are kind of a hodgepodge, but so the Crystal Lake Cemetery. So that one, with that small budget of $64,000, it is a challenge to maintain a historic cemetery of that size. And to promote it and keep it up as much as possible. So we've expanded our volunteer base to do headstone repair and cleaning. So we've developed we had a big workshop and developed a cadre of volunteers that we're kind of training as docents that can help us out there and help interpret and help manage the site, potentially with events on the weekend to bring people out, to highlight some of our more notable historic figures that are buried out there. That's something that I think we really need to work on. We have a annual Memorial Day event out there where we set out flags and typically do a small ceremony. So that's a challenge. There's also a rental house on that facility that we're not able to break away from the larger park. And so we've kind of limped along with that, but that's something coming up into the future. We'll have to take a really hard look at. It's not easy to keep maintaining, that old manufactured home. And so it's something that we're keeping up with it now, but in the future, we'll have to really talk about what that looks like. Campground operations. So we saw huge increases the last 2 years at Salmonberry Campground. I think during COVID, a lot of people discovered the site, hadn't thought about it before, and we've had, I think it was 30% increase in rentals out there. So that's going really well. Some downsides out there at Salmonberry is our well is not able to keep up. And so that's been a challenge. We collect State Marine Board funds for that site in support of recreation. And we're really going to have to figure out how to get that well going. So right now we've been working on that with some partnerships from Starker Forest. And that will be reflected in our CIP request as well as that, maintaining water or shower facilities down there is essential to make that site attractive enough. The LC Guard Station, so we work with the Forest Service to keep that site going. We did our annual inspection and they were thrilled with the site. We've been seeing increases there as well. So I think that was kind of one of our hidden gems that we started to promote a lot more recently, and it's helped a lot. We've got a lot more interest in the site, and the partnership with Siuslaw is doing really well, and so that facility is still going gangbusters. The Adair Clubhouse, so that one has been tough. A lot of deferred maintenance in that facility when Valley Catering and initially shut down, and we went through a couple different concessionaires, and right now we have a new local concessionaire that is doing really well, but that's been a challenge to keep that site up and running. Just a lot of issues with plumbing, the roof, paint job, new restrooms, you name it. So kind of across the board, we've had to increase the beautification out there and make the site more functional so that the concessionaires can actually get some business, and then we take a cut of that. So the trust funds. So Fort Hoskins, so that trust fund has been liquidated. There's nothing left in that account aside from a couple pennies, I think, or a few bucks. And so right now we're maintaining that site on general fund ground maintenance dollars in order to keep up with it. And we know that that's not sustainable. So we took the first step of, we can't really turn it into a trust again or seek sizable grant funding without a master plan or an interpretation plan. It just doesn't work like that. And so we got a group together of many folks that were involved historically in Fort Hoskins, and they are working on an interpretation plan and getting the bones together for us to work on a master plan project for that site. So that will really be essential for us to get grant funds and to maintain the Commander's House and the Franz Dunn House, without really yearly improvements, those kind of buildings being out there, those historic structures decline rapidly. So it's a challenge to keep up with it. And we've been lucky enough to have Dr. Dave Bronner kind of re-engage with the fort to help give us advisement on kind of where we're going. And he was instrumental in getting the Commander's House out there and really helping to establish that site. So, so as soon as that interpretation and master plan is done, I think we need to start talking about, kind of the future of how we fund Fort Hoskins, where there is some forestry projects out there that might be able to bring in some revenue to make, to reinvigorate that trust in the future. Bazell, we've been doing more and more events out there at that education center. The Bazell Family Mushroom Day was one of the biggest events we've had, and it continues to grow. So events are picking up out there. One of the biggest successes we had last biennium was a forestry project out there. We did a meadow connectivity project to adjacent meadows, and we improved those sites, and we timed it really well. So that helped kind of fill that trust back up again. But there's just a lot of maintenance out there with pump and well upgrades are definitely needed. And it's a lot of trail and a lot of roads to maintain. So just keeping up with the gravel and everything else. And we expect an ODOT culvert replacement soon out there in front. So that will really help us with our restoration efforts on the creek, potentially bringing more fish passage through there. Okay, so this one, this goal of doing a remote key drop-off system came from getting a call. I got a call on my work cell late one Friday evening from a young woman who was frantic because she forgot to pick up the key. She lives down in Monroe, and they were going to have their wedding at Bell Fountain. It was the sister. So of course, I ran in to get him the key, but we realized how burdensome that was to our community, and how environmentally unfriendly it was to expect somebody to come up on Friday, pick up the key, have the event, and come back on Monday and drop it off again from South County or or anyone renting that. So we've got a plan. We've got code programmable shelter rental keys that we'll be able to utilize, and I think that'll really help make it more convenient for our renters. And there's potentially people out there who would just never be able to make it out to the fairgrounds to pick up that key in time. And so basically renting a shelter has been kind of off limits to them if they're not able to come during working hours in the county. And so this will make it for anybody can rent a shelter, and we just give them a code. Install an automated dump system. So yeah, we've talked about that. We know that there's a significant number of folks that aren't paying in the box. We've actually compared it to video footage and seen how many $10 bills there are in there. And then a lot of times it doesn't add up, or, it's a stick in there or something else. And so, so I think this will be a fundraiser for us. We're projecting, by the end of the biennium to at least double our dump fees, and that's important. We have to make sure we have enough to maintain that site. Every time an RV comes into the fairgrounds, it's a little more wear and tear on the asphalt and everything else. And so this is a way for us to keep up with those facilities needs. Okay, so this hiring event. So this came out from, we had a hard time getting enough seasonal employees, caretakers, those type of positions. And we ran into a couple folks that just had a real challenge kind of navigating the county system. Some of them didn't have a computer. Some of them had questions. Some of them didn't really understand, the hiring paperwork needed and everything. And so this was a goal that we talked about with our HR department about how, we could really provide a low barrier hiring event for the fairgrounds, especially before fair. That we could be out there with an HR representative and potentially do interviews on the spot and that type of thing. And so that's where that one came from. And we hope we get some more folks that are looking to join us in the parks maintenance and out at the fairground that may not have otherwise had an opportunity to apply. So this is Cardwell Hill. So that's another issue that, I know Gary and Crestmont Land Trust and I have been talking about this recently. So part of that road is sloughing off into Marys River. It's making it really challenging for us to complete our forestry projects without having everything come out down the Chinook Road District roads. And it's more importantly, it's a safety issue long term. So that's something we need to figure out. Is kind of how we're gonna do that. And this kind of goes beyond the scope of what NAPE, our expertise are with road building and geotechnical engineering and that type of thing. And so, that 100-year-old road is, absolutely essential. So, we're happy to take the lead on start, finding collaboration to get that repaired. Yes.
Yeah, I was curious why. I thought of this project while Public Works was presenting, and I guess it was I didn't remember that this came under your department, and I guess how did that happen? I mean, this seems like more of a Public Works project than parks.
Yeah. I think for the most part it is, the evacuation routes are a little interesting because they double as a trail system for us. They're our main route for forestry projects. But the sheriff controls it, and Public Works has the expertise and the road building capacity. So, I do think the actual repair probably does fit better in Public Works, but for us and Public Works has been really supportive of the project. We've met with landowners out there to find solutions. If we can't mitigate the road, could we find other ways to make this work? So really, I think this kind of ended up with us, because it's a very high priority for us. And so, I think there is a lot of opportunity though, because of what it's used for that, we might be able to support with granting and that type of thing to find, but I think this will be Brian Lee, the sheriff, Public Works and NAPE and private landowners trying to figure this out.
I have just a follow-up question there. I would think that it fell in your lap partly because you have the relationship with all the adjacent landowners, just as you mentioned that, and so it's logical for you to take the lead. But I would assume that the CIP program request is primarily for the design component. It's not implementation.
I think so. I would imagine it depends on what the solution is. And there's a couple that are proposed out there that, there'll have to be some more further conversation with the landowner to find out if that would work for them.
Is it on Crestmont land?
Yes. Yeah, it's right next to the Crestmont Land Trust. Yeah. Okay, so the waterless landscape, that's something we know how to do. And the utility bills for water up in Adair for a business is high. And it was tough for our concessionaire to keep up with it. So this gives us a chance to really, do the right thing for the environment and to kind of flex our muscle and show that we can install a landscape like this and provide a really good example of what low-cost waterless landscape can look like. And so it'll also really help our concessionaire because they pay the utilities out there, and it'll really help them succeed because the site really needs to look pretty enough to have a wedding or an important meeting there. So the waterless landscape should help us achieve that. Okay, so a lot of our challenges are related to inflation and money. So the fairgrounds master plan, we see a lot of windows of opportunity there, especially with the TLT funds. But there's a lot of work to get that exhibit hall started. And it's really all money based. We are shovel ready. We're at the construction document phase. We are ready to roll. But the longer that we wait between that phase and implementation, means a lot of that work might have to kind of be redone, if the time frame is too long. North Albany County Park Master Plan upgrade. So that's a big one. So we did the master plan process for North Albany in 2019, the department, and they haven't really seen any changes out there yet. And I know it's frustrating to that community. And so we've been working a lot with volunteers to do upgrades as much as we can without some of the sizable changes, but what we were hoping for this year was that we would be doing a ribbon cutting on our new all-weather restroom. But cost increases have just kind of blown that out of the water. In the past, the Parks Department could have relied upon $100,000, and we know that we can supply a park restroom structure, but those days are gone. And so, you know, really trying to push. There's some grant opportunities when we're talking playgrounds and trails and some of those amenities, but straight up for restroom replacements, it's not easy to get that. So, you know, really focusing on facilities and CIP projects that we can deliver to the community. I think there's a lot out there that the community's heard about. We've done the master plan processes. We've gone out and talked to them. They're just waiting for us to deliver on it. One of the biggest opportunities that we have coming up is the Jackson Fraser Wetland Boardwalk replacement. So the interest in that is very high in our community. You know, the partnership there with the Owens Farm project and you know, how beloved it is. We've got a strong fundraising base right now. So we have the grant and the funds to replace the boardwalk, but we're still a little short. And so our community is really willing to step up and do some major fundraising efforts for us. And so that'll be exciting to see them work through that process in partnership with us. And we're really lucky to have Afrana, Greenbelt, a lot of these groups out there, Chetland Middle School, Audubon Society, and the Fish and Wildlife to help us with that. So, you know, they're all really supportive of the project. And so now we're going to go out to the community and ask them to help. And converting the Benton Arena. So, you know, that's our main focus out there, turning that thing into exhibit hall. Working through the Oregon Fairs Association, trying to speak with our local representatives and push that through. And so, you know, that might be another situation where we're asking for community support. But you know, we can't really move further on with our master plan without that project kind of being the centerpiece. That really kind of all hinges on that.
All right, any questions?
Got a couple comment earlier in the presentation, TLT and just how wonderful that is, and a recurring source of revenue. And I think that shows that was just sitting there, and I don't know quite how it developed, but Corvallis had their TLT in place for years, and I guess my point is just being creative and looking, and I know you are, but just looking for opportunities, and maybe with our shiny new department head showing up in a week who has from the interview, excellent background in promotion and fundraising, and so looking forward to seeing some more creative ideas for advancing some of these projects. We've invested a fair amount of money in the auditorium kitchen and a lot of wonderful stainless steel in the room there, but so far not much activity. What's the plan going forward to get the community more involved in that?
So right now we're working with the OSU Extension Service. So we're partnering to develop, you know, kind of a set of protocols for, you know, how to utilize that facility, some trainings, and that's going to be a really big support, I think. So they have some Extension Service members that are willing to, you know, help us, you know, say we get a incubator business that would like to use that site, or caterers or that type of thing. We need kind of since it's a really robust commercial kitchen with a lot of high-tech gadgets and stuff, and it's really easy to make a mistake and have the system shut down on you for safety, for example. And so that training program is really kind of lays the foundation for actually being able to utilize the site. And so that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're putting that together. So with that document, then we're going to be able to, set dates for interested parties to get trained up and be able to utilize the site. So once that document is in place, I would imagine we'll start reaching out, kind of making calls out to the community, who's looking for a commercial kitchen. Offering, time periods, be it a couple months, and how that would work for an incubator business and the caterers for the events going on there. So it's kind of all the details. Right now, it was all about getting the facility up and running, get all the trays and busing tables and everything that, kind of the fairgrounds didn't necessarily know a whole lot about, but we've had to reach out to partners that we have to kind of show us, what is it? What do they actually need to put on a big catered event there? So we're just about ready to start utilizing it. So now all of those pieces are in place, I think we're ready to go.
Great. Oh, I guess one more thought, and this is probably from a couple of years ago, but I think our Albany Parks has adopt a park program to encourage volunteers to, probably their neighborhood park and sign up. And I know we rely on volunteers, but that might be a good model to see how, because I think that's been in place for a decade or more. And I remember something about they even come to the North Albany Park that's in Benton County. So I think would be a model to see just how it works, what kind of administration oversight it takes to organize the volunteers and that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I know you have a pretty limited budget for maintenance and making any improvements, and maybe that's something that could help.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. We'd love to explore that. Yeah. Volunteerism is a huge part of what we do, but we've never been able to fully get that program just with staff capacity going. So it's been a little bit more hodgepodge trying to bring that together. And I think, with our new executive director and our new admin program manager that's in recruitment right now, I think we're going to be able to see those kinds of capacity strengthening efforts to where we could kind of make our volunteer program more robust.
And Tommy starts a week from today, is that
That's
correct?
right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Should be on May 3rd.
Okay, Liz and then Zan.
I have two things. Are you coordinating with this hiring event for some outside organizations? For example, I celebrate Corvallis. I met this great gentleman that works with people with mental health issues trying to enter the workforce. That maybe that's a great opportunity for them to kind of get their feet wet and find some help.
Yeah.
Are you reaching out to organizations like that at all?
Yeah, I think that would be great. We haven't started that yet, but that was always kind of the goal. Look for anything. We were actually, hoping to partner with, the Hardwood Center and Lynn Benton Community College and those type of folks too. Because it is a really great way to get your feet wet with event production, parks maintenance, all that kind of stuff. So I agree. We'd definitely be reaching out to as many organizations as we could, because we could make this as big, or small as we'd like. So I think that would be great.
Then it helps everybody too.
Yeah.
And then as far as the fairgrounds, again, I'm kind of new to the group here. Are you working with emergency management funds to maybe upgrade or do anything with the fairgrounds in case of wildfires, which could also help you develop the fairgrounds for those concerts and all the other fun stuff?
That's huge. So we, there's a lot of EOC training that goes on out there. We're linked in with our emergency manager, Brian Lee, on a lot of those efforts. And so, we're definitely linked in. There's not a lot of money flowing yet. Right now, there is a bill in the House that's addressing that potentially to help kind of strengthen fairgrounds for the role that they play in emergency management. So I think that's something that we just have to keep working on. I think Brian's done a really great job of kind of integrating the fairgrounds into that. But you're right, because that really is, I mean, our name comes up for cold weather sheltering, hot weather sheltering, wildfire evacuation, and so with enough funding, and I know the health department's explored scrubbers for smoke and stuff like that. And I think they identified, I don't think the fairgrounds made the cut for the buildings that they had identified for their needs yet. But I think that's something that has definitely been in the works, and we try to position ourselves to be supportive of any emergency management operation.
Yeah, I think you can request congressional funds, like you can work with your delegation and specifically ask for what you want and have them write it into future packages. So that would be the way to do it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. We'll definitely do that in the future if we haven't already, which I don't believe we have.
I shared my mind, just interested. So great points, and I think, obviously the components of NAPE is dependent on finding and identifying resources. One of the things that's in the Board of Commissioners budget is an increase in dollars to be able to have support for doing exactly what you talked about in terms of going out and finding and identifying those federal resources that are out there. We've been very successful in our congressional delegated spending process in terms of working with that, but I think we're missing some opportunities as it relates to a lot of the federal dollars that are out there. And I think Jesse's been working with our person at DC, Michael Skipper from the firm, to try to really identify how do we get more aggressive in that particular arena. I'm excited about those opportunities because I think there's a lot of things we don't know, that there's dollars out there that are left on the table.
I have one question, and I don't think we have time to go into any great discussion. I just want to highlight it because it's been a concern of mine for years. And that is that Natural Areas Parks and Events manages many of our historic buildings. And it's a kind of a shared responsibility with community development, with the Historic Resources Commission there in that program. But we don't have an overall plan for historic resources or any kind of a vision for how we want to promote them or how we fund them or anything else. And it's been an issue for a long time, and it's only getting worse because, as you say, any of these historic buildings year over year, they decline further, and then we dig ourselves further into the hole financially in terms of being able to do something with them. So I would love to see a historic resources plan for the county that really addresses all of our owned historic resources and how we intend to promote them, use them, take care of them into the future.
Kurt or Chaz, do you have any questions? Kurt, no?
No, I'm good for now. Thank you, though.
Thank you. All right, well, with that, thank you so much.
Thank you. Wait.
And I think I will call for a short break before we move on. So we will come back at 2:14.
Recording stopped.
Get started. I'm sure Commissioner Malone will be joining us just momentarily, and looks like we have community development department. Let's try that again. We can go ahead and get started. And we have community development department. And I just have to say 34 pages. I think that's the thickest budget section we have so far. I don't know if I should be excited or worried. All right, take it away, gentlemen.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much, Madam Chair. I again appreciate Darren Nichols being here with me, the Director of Community Development. I just want to start out by saying he's done, him and his staff done a really good job in terms of this budget development process. I know, well, everybody's done a great job, but I think, Darren and I both have, coming from the state, I think we're both familiar with different types of processes as it relates to the budget. And Darren has really kind of thrived at this in terms of developing his budget packages. So I just want to compliment him and the work that he has done in preparing these. I mean, they were very robust packages. And as I always say, you'd like to be able to fund everything. You'd like to be able to recommend everything. But unfortunately, just never enough money. So just kudos to him and Shannon and staff that have put this together. I know they put a lot of hard work. So I'm going to jump in, try to be quick, get out of the way so Darren can talk about the good stuff. I'm going to just quickly go, as always, through the budget. In terms of the current service level budget, we are estimating a $6.47 million budget, which is approximately 2% above 21-23, which very small percentage increase there. And I'll talk about one of the reasons that drives that. But before I get there, the recommended additional funding, so the policy packages that are being recommended to you is about 1.5 million. And then when you put the application of the vacancy factor that we're putting towards every department, that puts us to a budget of about $7.79 million. So when you put that in comparison to 21-23, it's about a 22% increase. So again, the additional investments is driving the majority of this.
Recording in progress.
In terms of the current service level,
Rick, start over where you talk about how good a job I
did. So just real quickly on the vacancy factor, just to mention, and Darren and I talked a little bit about this, there is 6.7. That's a little on the high side. Probably again 5 to 6% is what we had typically seen. Again, I know Darren's had some vacancy in the past 6 years. I know he's been committed to bringing staff on and retaining them. So I would expect him probably not to be at that level, but he knows that certainly as we watch and manage that, we'll be working with him. And if there are problems associated, we'll be prepared to be able to support him. So again, a little on the high end there. In terms of, again, primary drivers, what you'll hear in the policy packages is a lot of the 3.85 staffing. I've already told you about that little magical 0.35 FTE that will come into play. That's the other half of Gary's discussion earlier about getting a full-time position. So I think the one thing that I guess want to point out as it relates particularly to the current service level. So when you look at personal services and you look at material supplies, it's about 14 to 15% growth. That's again back to the average. That's right at 13.74. It's right on target with what we've seen in other areas. What I really want to point out is the minus 63% in the contingency. And that's related primarily to the building division and a lot of the fees that they have in relation to building permits. So this is kind of the same conversation we had with James Morales last time in relation to the document recording fee. But in terms of the building permits, I know Ron's here as well, and I'm sure he would say is it's a little bit of a roller coaster ride. It's very cyclical, what you see, and that is sort of downward shifting at this point. And I think he's done a great job over the years in terms of managing that. It's not easy. You're trying to manage a staff with a uncertain revenue, and that's a big challenge. And so again, I think, you know, how do we manage that successfully? How do we ensure that the revenues and supports are there? Because we can't be in that situation where revenues go down. Okay, we lose somebody, or we have to, you know, hold off on hiring someone, because that doesn't help us with sustainable staffing and being able to train people up. So this is a conversation I think we need to continue to have. Darren and I had talked about this in making sure that we were successful in keeping our staff, training our staff, and not, again, always watching the bottom line, always watching the revenues, but you don't want to have to be in that situation where you're constantly juggling people and having to delay hiring of people. So just move to the pie chart a little bit. Again, nothing different than already have said. Obviously, personal services is a huge piece of the community development budget. 71% of the entire budget is related to staffing. The 5%, the contingency drop that you see there, again, I think that's a circle. That's something that we want to continue to watch. That's again an element of the market that we're in, and I think it's just, again, a good thing to take note of as we move forward into the next biennium. Of course, we'll be watching it. Marilee, a new analyst that's behind me, she's been very diligent, and she'll be watching that very closely as we move into this. In terms of the pie chart related to revenue sources, again, kind of two elements. This is one of those that is 100% general fund, but it's again, not to be fooled by the term general fund, thinking that it's all flexible resources. Actually, 57% of this is dedicated revenues that we see from, again, as we talked about, the building permit fees are certainly the largest portion, but there are some other resources, or excuse me, other resources that they do see in terms of charges for service, such as land use, school excise taxes, and other area electrical permits. Again, there are a variety of different types of ones, but certainly the building permits is the one that we certainly keep the eye on. But again, 57% of the resources for this particular budget is dedicated money that is housed in the general fund. Last piece before I kind of turn it over to Darren for the balance of the presentation is, again, just a breakdown into the different areas, again, so you can see not just the total budget, but where are some of the changes. Again, looking at the building permits and inspections, take note of that. Current service level is down, revenues are down, so that's an area that we'll continue to watch. But the other two areas of solid waste and land use planning, which are the kind of major cost center components of our construct, are right about at average 14 and 10%. And that's what brings us to the balance of the 2%. So again, you see that the big increase in the areas related to the proposed increase will be solid waste programs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nichols. I'll hand him the remote, because I know he's got a lot of fun little things here in his presentation, and let him take it away.
Okay, thank you, Rick. And let me turn the compliments back around to you and Marilee and your team. You have been incredibly helpful in helping us work through what is kind of where we've been, but also where we're going and how to structure that. And I just want to say a big thanks to our colleagues over at Finance. So good afternoon. It's a little difficult to follow people with state-of-the-art tractors and small children eating corn on the cob at the fair and rodeo. That's just at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday. That makes it really hard. But to try to overcome those, let me start out with an org chart. Okay, so we're going to talk for the next little bit about where we've been, who we've been, and where we're headed, who we need to be, or who we think Benton County really needs, not just community development to be, but the community development function at Benton County. So to give you a quick snapshot here, you'll see our cost centers. There's basically 4 teams represented here. On the far left is solid waste. Then moving from left to right, the next group is our planning division. In the center is kind of more administration and customer service. And then on the far right is the building division, permitting division. A couple of things about who we are today before we launch into kind of where we're headed. We are primarily a permit processing center. We're very good at reviewing and reacting to building permits, mechanical, plumbing permits, electrical permits, land use permits. Where we want to move toward is a more forward-looking organization that helps this community really see where it is, see where it wants to be, and then take the steps to get there. That is not something we can do alone. And so one of the reasons that this budget is really robust, I think last Thursday you heard Mr. Krager describe it as the world's largest policy package, which I wanted to clarify just briefly to say it's the world's most impactful policy package. There's actually an opportunity here, I think, for us not to look out for ourselves, but to look out for all of our colleagues across the Benton County governance enterprise in a way that makes us all able to do our jobs better, to be more effective at looking ahead, anticipating change and getting ready for it, which frankly is the definition of resilience. So later we'll take a closer look at kind of what we're going to look like. But for right now, here's the land use planning program. We have one senior planner, 3 associate planners, 1 assistant planner, and then yours truly, the department director, is serving as the planning official for the time being. We have a number of different planning specialties on staff, and we have a number of different kinds of responsibilities. I think the takeaway here really is this: we spend less than 10%, actually much less than 10%, doing long-range planning. What we talk about in terms of planning is really reviewing and implementing plans that are now, kind of in the past, and keeping up with codes that are overdue for an overhaul. So one of the things that we've done for the last year and a half is take a hard look at where we spend our time and where we should be spending our time. And I know you know this, but we spend the distinct minority of our time actually looking forward. We do a lot more implementation. Some of the things that we would like to get to is in that second to last bullet: other projects relating to natural resource conservation, wildfire protection, Oregon statewide planning program, really implementing and kind of revamping our comprehensive plan and our development code. Those are places we'd like to spend more time. In this category, we also help support the planning programs at Philomath, Adair Village, and Monroe. So we offset some of the costs of implementing their programs through a shared staff position. All right, the next section of kind of who we are today is building permits and inspections. We do a lot of building permits and inspections. Last year, I think we were just under 2,000 building permits. That takes a lot of effort. Take those in, review the plans, approve the permits, and get those out the door. Later on, we're going to talk a little bit about some important changes we've made in that program so that we're more efficient. But really, Ron Dietrich and his team handle the plan review part of it, the inspections piece of it, and across all of these areas: building structural permits, mechanical permits, electrical, plumbing, and manufactured dwellings. And again, we provide some support services for the smaller cities in Benton County. We do their plan reviews and inspections as well. Last but not least, Ron and the team provide a public face to community development through the community development technicians. We really provide a high level of customer service at the front counter, and we're proud of the ability to meet people, answer questions, pull in our colleagues at environmental health or public works or the assessor's office as needed to help property owners and others get their questions answered and move forward with their development needs. All right, last but not least, solid waste and water quality. Again, this is an existing program. You all have met Daniel Reddick. Daniel's our kind of lone staffer in this space, assisted by a very capable intern, Marin Shermer from Oregon State University. He's been helping us get through the VCTT project. The solid waste program does a lot of really important things in the community, part of which includes kind of overseeing the operations at Coffin Butte landfill, but more importantly, innovating with community partners and exploring ways to do better at how we manage solid waste and materials in our community. And that's one of the exciting things I think about the future of this program is building a plan for how we manage sustainable materials. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. Daniel also helps the Public Works Department with our reporting of total maximum daily loads. So the water quality function. Daniel spends about a quarter of his time on that program. Helps out with stormwater management, tracks, riparian stream cover, and one, I think, really innovative partnership. It sort of exemplifies ways we could do even better. We have a partnership with Rich Spofford over at Roads, where he has a kind of a counter on his road sweepers, and he uses that to track the miles of roads that we sweep as an indicator of ways that we're keeping pollutants out of our streams because we're sweeping and picking those up. And so it's one of the things I think we could do more interdepartmentally is kind of pick up on the good work that each department is doing and begin to evaluate and track that so that we just know how much good work we're doing and also what that means in terms of the cleanliness of our waterways. And of course, Daniel and Marin and Greg and Inga and a whole host of others helped us for the last 9 months get through the Benton County Tox Stress Solid Waste Working Group process, and greatly appreciate having that expertise in-house. All right, here's the Department of Administration. There's the 1.65 administrative specialist, the one program coordinator, that's Shannon Bush. And then of course, yours truly as the director. This is really kind of our administrative capacity. That 0.65 is a holdover from a shared position that we used to have at Avery. When we moved to Calapooya, we had to kind of remove ourselves from the operations at Avery and then reset up here at Calapooya. We're looking forward to hiring a full-time receptionist with your support, hopefully in the next biennium. And we think that will be another part of the face of the department and a really important asset for us in terms of customer service and coordination. This is also the team that interacts with you directly at the Board of Commissioners level, at the Planning Commission level. This is where if there's a land use hearing that's working its way through the system and it's going to appear before the board, this is the team that helps to coordinate with the Board of Commissioners staff and make sure that County Council gets brought in at the right time and that the Planning Commission decision gets timely conveyed to the board for its consideration. So this is kind of the team that keeps the trains running on time in our land use program. Of course, this is also where we administer the budget. And as you'll see a little bit later, this is where we think that the policy packages we put forward begin to free up some time here for the convening and community engagement functions that have, for the most part, been missing for a while. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that too. Actually, I'm going to go back here for just a second. A couple of examples. The Community Development Roundtable is something that we've been able to do. Bringing Shannon Bush on board has just increased our capacity to convene community members for important conversations. And I know Commissioner Wise and Commissioner Ojero have taken advantage of an opportunity to attend those quarterly meetings and really listen to design professionals, builders, contractors, others who have an interest in our work. We'd like to do more of that. And I think it helps us be a better county governance structure. I think it also helps to meet the needs in the community and to just be better humans by getting together once in a while. The Planning Commission is planning to do a listening tour around Benton County this summer, which we encourage. This is the team that supports the logistics to get out and about so that we don't just live here in the ivory tower that is Calapooya, but we actually get out and we meet our colleagues in Monroe and Alpine and Bell Fountain and Blodgett and Summit and Kings Valley and Philomath and Adair and several others. Wren, the list goes on. This is also where the strategic planning happens, and we've stood up a leadership team internally that's a diverse group of thought leaders, different career points. But just want to call out Shannon Bush, Ron Dietrich, Toby Lewis, Linda Ray, Suzanne Larson, and Greg Verrett for their leadership and helping me and us be thoughtful and strategic in the way that we have presented this budget to you, for example. All right, so moving on to the Thriving Communities Initiative. Goal 1, by June 2024, hire full-time in-house staff capacity to manage GIS needs. GIS, for those of you that are following along, geospatial information systems. It's like electronic maps that tell us how we're doing and what's happening where in the landscape. And if you think about it from a planning standpoint, it's one of the most critically important tools we have or need to have in our toolbox to plan for the future. So the idea here is that by bringing some in-house expertise, some dedicated land use and building development GIS expertise, it will help us help you to make data-informed decisions. We have really appreciated the IT department, Doug Sackinger and his team, Deanne over at Public Works have been super helpful to us, but it's not the same as having kind of dedicated analytic capacity in-house to track and monitor and forecast where we're headed around things like our zoning map or our floodplains or our natural resource and habitat protection areas, natural hazards, you think about wildfire and the conversation around wildfire or landslides. It's critically important that we have the data to be able to know whether it makes sense and where to put the next generation of housing, for instance, or other development investments. So GIS really it's a primary communications tool, but we feel like it's important to add that capacity at some point.
Malone, did you have a question?
Yeah, the GIS, and I will say I don't know anything about it, but assessment was talking about. Oh. Thank you. Assessment and their GIS and Public Works. Is there any opportunities for sharing of programs or people or any opportunities along those lines?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to hurry up and get through these slides so we can get to that question. I think it's probably one of Benton County's biggest opportunities is to connect our data sets. We sit on several gold mines worth of information that would be even more valuable if we could connect them and share information in real time. And we'll talk a little bit about that.
Great.
If you'll indulge me just a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Okay, so goal 2 is to develop a interdepartmental business model to deliver development services across the Benton County enterprise. So this is exactly what you just asked about. And would say, so what does development services mean? Well, it basically means a holistic approach to responsible governance or responsible decision-making across all of our different permitting and property tracking systems. In a lot of ways, this goal is laying the groundwork for a cultural shift that is centered on partnership. It's centered on better information sharing, more real-time data. I think I've mentioned this before. Let's take a minute. Through our planning program, we authorize what can be built and where in the landscape or what can't be built sometimes. That information then gets translated into building permits. People want to develop a barn or they want to build a house or they want to make an investment in their property. It takes about 18 months for the results of that permit to get moved physically, manually moved over to our assessor's office so that they can then apply the newly appraised value to the property. That, in my opinion, should happen automatically. It should just happen in the system. Our colleagues over at assessment should see the permits that are coming in the door and know that we've got a bulge in the system or that we're seeing more housing, an uptick in housing or an uptick in commercial or industrial real estate investment, and be prepared to evaluate and appraise those properties really from the time they finish their final, immediately when they finish their final inspection. So yes, there's an opportunity. I think the same thing is true with our colleagues at Records and Elections. They record covenants on properties. Sometimes it takes us hours, literally hours, for a staff person, skilled staff people, to track down what has or hasn't happened on a property to know whether it can or can't be eligible for a building project. And there are so many other ways we would like to be spending that staff time, but because we don't have ready access to the data at our partners, it makes it difficult for us to do our job. So yes, there's lots of opportunity and we'd love to talk more about ways to do that. Special thanks to Joe Kirby and to the Board of Commissioners and to Suzanne and Rick really for seeing the opportunity in our policy package number 2. We had set aside some money to facilitate that conversation, that interdepartmental partnership conversation. And I think Joe and Suzanne and Rick recognize that really this is a board leadership opportunity. And I could not agree more. I'm wholeheartedly in support of that. And so not knowing quite where you all are going to land, just want to say we're very supportive of that direction and leadership and investment coming from the Board of Commissioners. I think it sets an important tone. All right, so goal number 3 was to publish a monthly permitting dashboard. We have a beta version of that we've been trying out internally and with some selected external partners. I brought some flashy new copies of it if you want a hard copy. It's also in your packet. It's already helping us understand our business model and make important changes, which we'll get to at the end of this presentation, but we'd like to double down on that as we go forward, the ability to track our performance and then adjust based on what we learn. Yeah. That's right. Is another opportunity for us to improve how we do business. All right, so switching gears to goal number 4, apply to the Department of Land Conservation and Development for a community grant that would fund one or more elements of comprehensive plan or development code update work. We've been encouraged to submit for grant applications by the Department of Land Conservation and Development. One of the things they would really like to see is a comprehensive set of requests and would like to work with the board. So I expect that we'll come and see you probably in June with a representative from DLCD who will kind of talk about the options for ways that the state might be able to help us get this work done more effectively and with some state investment. All right, so the next slide is really, it's called a summary. I think it's an overview of our the policy option packages that were recommended to you. So you'll see here the total recommended budget increase is 1.317 and change with 3.85 full-time equivalent positions added to our staff. So in addition, we had requested 3 policy packages, which we're going to walk through here in just a moment. And then based on the county administrator's review, the first of those packages was fully funded. The other 2 received partial funding. And then, as we just mentioned, the $100,000 for a facilitated dialogue around software and a development services model has been recommended to move over into the board's budget. So that together with the vacancy factor leads to the 1.317. And as Rick mentioned earlier, it's a little over 20% increase in our budget. So just as a reminder, here's who we are today. And here's who we think we need to be going forward. So you can tell there are more boxes on the org chart. Here are the boxes that we put forward in this year's budget request. So what was funded or what was recommended for funding approval? You'll see the 5 check marks there totaling the 3.85. Starting at the top, we've asked for a dedicated full-time deputy director. That's somebody to keep the trains running on time in operations, so primarily fiscal and personnel. Along with that, a full-time receptionist, which we've had basically 0.65 FTE worth of funding. We think that is something we need at a full-time level, so we've asked for that. Over on the far left top, a planning division manager, a full-time skilled planner to also manage the planning division. And sort of paired with that over on the far right is a true building official, a certified building official who is also a building official in title. For a long time, we've relied on a chief building inspector. Ron Dietrich has served that role, and he's also served as our building official. But if you look at the way that cities and counties around us are structured, they have a true building official and then a chief inspector beneath that. And we feel like to recruit the next generation of leadership in our building division, we need to step up our game in that space and actually establish a true building official. So, why? Well, one reason is so that individual can engage with the fire districts. So the fire marshals and the building officials can kind of engage in relationship building exercises. Same thing with our city partners, and frankly, our surrounding counties. We will be better served if we have a true building official to provide kind of that extra level of leadership and also continue to perform plan review and inspection services. All right, so last but not least is a stormwater water quality program coordinator. I mentioned that Daniel Reddick serves about 0.25 FT, so a portion of Daniel's time is spent on water quality issues. We think it's probably time for Benton County to have a full-time water quality coordinator, somebody who can convene the expertise at Public Works, at natural areas, parks and events, environmental health, and community development, but really convene our water expertise. So what wasn't recommended for funding? You'll see there's two positions here. Policy package 2 is the question mark on the right. That's the GIS specialist, which we've talked about. Policy package 3 requested an outreach and communications coordinator, and really our feeling was that if we're going to engage in long-range planning and make that a part of what we do, we need some skilled expertise and some capacity to engage the community in helping with that work. The best planning is planning that is informed by, supported by, and embraced by the community that it serves. And so that's what those two positions are for. All right, so here come the packages. I'm going to do this quick. Policy package 1 is really intended to stabilize the department. So this is kind of restructuring and stabilizing our staffing coming out of the pandemic and giving us a little bit more of a kind of a true community development department structure to work from. So this is where the 3.85 FTEs are located. And this is positions. So here they are. These are recurring investments. You talked through those positions a minute ago. These are the green check marks. So what are the outcomes? Well, it restores some of the positions that we lost as part of some of the capacity we lost as part of the move to Calpullia. It also improves our customer service at the front counter. We talked a little bit about the building official and the deputy director. I think we've talked about these 5 positions, but this is really a staffing package to get us back to a whole community development department. Policy package 2 is mostly a one-time request for a software package that meets the needs, not just of our department, but of the departments I mentioned earlier. It's really an interdepartmental software upgrade so that all of our permitting and development review activity can be coordinated and tracked, and so that all of our existing data is more accessible to our staff. So this was recommended for partial funding. That's the $100,000 that you now see showing up in the board's budget. And again, I'm just couldn't be happier actually to see that move, and very much support the board making that investment. So here's what that looks like in terms of investments. The one-time cost, as it was requested, for a permitting software upgrade, a large screen TV display outside of our office, and then some consulting services. You'll see that some of that was not moved forward, but the consulting services for a facilitator was moved forward. Some of the recurring investments that we asked for, primarily the GIS technician and the community solutions coordinator, the code compliance position, were not moved forward. Some of the other kind of related cross training was also not moved forward. So yeah, I hear some expected chatter in the audience. And it's because we already have a lower level community solutions position we've proposed to upgrade that. So I think that because we already have that, yeah, Rick's gonna correct me if I get this wrong, because we already have that one FTE.
Mhm.
It enables us to burn it and then burn the position using the parlance of our finance department. And then replace it with an upgraded program coordinator.
Yeah, so thanks to Darren. So the investments piece number 2 that has the question mark, the elevated community solution program and staff capacity. That is built in to the budget. So that is a funded position now. Like Darren said, it was basically what we call a burn and establish. You had a position that it was a burn, and then basically this was created. So that would be a check mark from my standpoint.
Thank you. Check. Okay. Well, the PowerPoint.
That's that little $20,000 that you saw there. That's the
Right.
difference.
Thanks. So I think what happened is we had this in the initial budget request and it didn't move forward the way it was. Yeah, so anyway.
And that's the one that's accomplished partly with VOC.
So so on this particular package, $100,000 is the one that goes to the BOC, and that's for facilitation services. And then Darren, can you flip back just really quick? Oh, sorry, I forgot you had to go through all. So in total, the package was $120,000. So that $20,972 that you see in his budget, that's basically the cost of being able to get him to the community solutions coordinator position.
Yeah, thank you for asking the questions and for filling in the blanks. That was a bit of a creative move. The idea, though, is that we step up our game around the community solutions code enforcement part of our program. For a variety of reasons, it makes sense for us to invest at a higher level in that position, mainly because we're going to need a highly skilled individual to help us out in that space. Okay. So let me just work back through the animations, compliments of Shannon Bush. All right, policy package number 3. So this is really the long range planning package. The idea here was that we were asking for funding from Benton County to invest in one or more comprehensive plan updates, code updates. And as you well know, that is a long list. So we didn't, and I would never advise us to try to take on the whole backlog in one biennium. This was an attempt to at least get started on that. And what has been recommended for moving forward is the Sustainable Materials Management Plan, which is recommended by the Solid Waste Process Working Group. And some of this funding, if the board is ready and the planning commission is ready and staff is ready during this biennium, some of the funding for this work we believe can come from and probably should come from the state of Oregon. So it's a conversation coming up, but I think the administrator didn't feel like biting off this much. I'm sort of just out of hand. And so there's a conversation still needing to happen here. But at a minimum, it's appropriate to move forward with the Sustainable Materials Management Plan, and that's the 400,000.
And Darren, if I might just make a correction, and I apologize, too much late night work. On the previous slide that Darren was on, the source, just to make sure it's correct, that is general fund discretionary. It's not the internal fleet external fund. I don't know, Gary would appreciate that very much. And then the basis is basically, that would just been Darren's cost estimate for what we thought in relation to contracted services for the 400,000. So I apologize for that.
I'm kind of sorry that you caught it. All right, thank you, Rich. Yeah, I know there's some late night pulling these things together. All right, so there were a couple of things here, and I've already talked about the recurring investment, the need for an outreach and communications coordinator. That's really, it's the capacity to tell the world what we're doing. It's essentially an investment in transparency around how we prioritize and how we make progress on long range planning efforts. The one-time cost was consulting services to do one or more of these complicated and really important kind of planning exercises. The one that you do see recommended is the Sustainable Materials Management Plan. Again, that's a much longer list of needs.
theoretically with a common software package across departments and the ability to have real-time data entry and not have to take months to transfer information from one department to the other. It would save enough time that it might save staff time, correct? So that some of these really are a big leap and big step in current investment, but down the road may enable us to operate more efficiently.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I wish that my crystal ball was more clear in terms of how much we can save and how much we would then free up to focus on long range planning.
Yes.
I think this biennium is going to tell us a lot about what we're able to do with existing staffing levels. And I feel good about the direction that we're headed. I would say I don't believe that we're going to be able to save enough to totally satisfy the need, but it will provide, some additional staffing to meet long range planning.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And a big part of the reason my crystal ball isn't as clear as I'd like it to be is that hinges on the willingness and ability of other departments to work with us. And they will also see some cost savings. And so I think that's an important outcome of the $100,000 investment. It's to develop a model that can work for our department colleagues and also kind of evaluate the electronic tools to really maximize the savings out of those efficiencies. And until we have that conversation, we won't know for sure. But I would say from other, past experiences, the upside to that investment is huge. So I'm very optimistic.
I would expect it would also be very much appreciated in the eyes of builders, developers, any individual landowner who has to deal with multiple departments.
Yeah. When you order something from Amazon, you can track the package and when it's going to arrive sometimes within minutes on your doorstep. And I sometimes tantalize our internal and external colleagues by saying we should be pretty close to that in terms of being able to anticipate the time it's going to take to coordinate all of your development permits and get ready to move forward on something. I don't know that we can get to that level of precision, but we should be able to get closer than we are. Yeah.
Only we had their revenues.
Well, it's true. We should be, it would help us be able to forecast countywide revenues better. Yes. Yeah. So, okay, more to come. Good questions. Thank you. So, partially funded there, not recommended for funding in the staff position. All right. So I know we're just about out of time. Rick, how are we doing? Wrap it up.
Yeah, a few more minutes.
All right. So, yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about some of the current and future challenges. Over the last 20 years, it's looked like a boom and bust building cycle, which we've always been a little bit cautious because we haven't wanted to overspend when we really needed staff. And then by the time we sort of get ready to invest in staff, the cycle starts to turn down and we pull back. And that's it's normal behavior, but we have kind of surged forward and then pulled back a number of times over the last 25 years. And it's left us structurally shorthanded. The way that plays out is that when our building team really needs plan reviewers or other kind of staffing to review the boom cycle, we borrow from our planning staff to focus on permit reviews. And that's just how that is how that's played out. So by the time we sort of get through the boom and things settle down a bit, we get back to looking at what our long range planning needs are. And by the time we kind of have that figured out, we're moving into the next boom cycle. And so it's just left us shorthanded. Interdepartmental coordination, we've already talked about. You all know that we've been through a recession, a pandemic, a housing crisis, and frankly, some pretty substantial changes in the population. And I would say more coming going forward. Staff turnover and a restructure in the department, those are all, I think, challenges and opportunities, but that's where we've been. So what are the opportunities? Stabilizing department operations, restructuring our permit processes for consistency, efficiency, and transparency. The move to Calapooya gives us an opportunity to put a new public face on community development. And that is, I just want to stop and say thank you for making the investment, first of all, but also we take that seriously. And I think there's still an opportunity for us to continue to fill those shoes as part of the face of Benton County. There's also, that creates then some opportunity for new vision. And I put down here new visions because I think a lot of people kind of want to see different things from community development. So one of our next opportunities is frankly to pull that into a vision for what community development means in Benton County. And then we've talked about the long range planning work backlog. To help us with that, we've put together a roadmap. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, except to say that for the last year and a half, we've been working on a strategic operations work plan that lays out the next 10 years going forward. And at some point, we'd like to share that with you. The main thing is we call it a roadmap because it implies it's a journey toward a destination. And in order to get there requires investment. We need to invest in Benton County. We need to invest in our future and the governance and the partnerships and the staffing and the technology that it takes to get there. So what would it look like? Well, we think it looks like a handful of initiatives with some mile markers that tell us that we're making progress. We did this from the perspective of community development, but we tried to pull in existing priorities. So you'll see here, we've aligned things that we know we need and the mile markers we think we need to achieve with the 2040 Thriving Communities Initiative, with the Board of Commissioners' existing long-range planning priorities, with the Planning Commission's priorities, and also with kind of what we're hearing from our stakeholders and community. So we've done that across a handful of these initiatives. So we talk about implementing this development services model. We talk a little bit about building trust through transparency, which we've touched on through the presentation, ensuring access to data and information, not just internally, but also providing access to the public so that they can help us all be smarter and more effective when we make decisions about our future. And then helping to plan and prepare for that future, which we've talked a lot about, the planning functions. Facilitating community and data informed action. Really, this is the definition of resilience. Being able to, in real time, anticipate changes that are coming, adjust, adapt. It's really, in my mind, that is the definition of a resilient community. It's connected, it's informed, it knows how to work together, and is in fact working together. So going forward, the challenges and opportunities, connecting with the community and really fostering community input and community connections. Operationalizing efficient development services functions and performance metrics, not just for the sake of development, but also to know how we're impacting the landscape and how we're using our scarce natural resources so that we don't overutilize those or over impact them. Setting clear priorities for long range planning and policy for all types of issues, conservation, working lands, ag and timber, other natural resources, and the development that it takes to support our community. Coordinating information, expertise, connections, and outcomes across the county. Really skipping to the bottom there. This is about shared information, shared goals, shared resources, and shared benefits. That is community development. It's people working together toward a future that they want to be part of. So a couple of quick wins here. You've got hard copies of this. We're using this sort of informally. This is very much a beta, but we're ready to publish it now. If you look here, I'm going to stand up just so you can see. Hopefully you can still hear me. You'll see that for the last several springs, we've come out of the winter that's very much up.
Looks like you are getting it in microphone, sir.
Thank you. If you take a look here, you'll see that in the last several years, coming out of January, February, March, it's been an upward trend in development risk. But you'll see what happened in 2023. We came out and we were dropping like a rock, which is partly why you see the contingency in our budget. We were anticipating a sharp drop off in especially residential building permits. Well, what happened in February is it turned back around and it started to pick back up. So largely probably due to the changes in interest rates, but our ability to use tools like this to forecast kind of where we need to have staff and when and what it means for us across a variety of metrics we think is important going forward. And it enables us to do things like the next thing I'm going to show you here, which is this. Typical weeks to permit issuance for dwellings and structures, 3 weeks. If you remember a year ago this time, we were at 12 weeks and we knew that was unacceptable, but we were trying to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps coming out of a pandemic. And I just want to say a big shout out to the team for finding ways to improve the way that we do business so we can get this back into a normal range. I think there's probably some additional efficiencies to achieve, but we're doing really, really well. All right. So, so what does all that mean in a nutshell? I think there's 3 big takeaways. The first is that we need to stabilize the staff and the capacity of this department and kind of know what to expect from it. The second is we need a holistic approach to development review across the Benton County enterprise. The third is we need to invest in community engagement so that we know what this community needs and what this community is going to need 20, 40, 100 years out. We really need to take a long-term view. It's how we're going to make sure we have water. It's how we make sure we're going to have housing. It's how we're going to anticipate the impacts of changes in the climate and precipitation so that we don't inadvertently get too far ahead of ourselves or ahead of our surrounding counties. So I think there's some real opportunities. We're excited about those and just appreciate your willingness to kind of think through this with us and invest in our county. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Liz? And then Pat.
I didn't hear addressed in this, the affordability factor of Benton County for one of the issues is driven by just the need for housing. I heard somewhere in one of our presentations, we're anticipating 20,000 people. I forget what year it's by in like the next 10 years or 20 years to come to Benton County and how we're addressing that. Also, I didn't hear anything about anticipated climate migrants that we could expect and how we're going to deal with those. And then because I know we're running late, so I'm just going to lump all this on you, Darren. Sorry. And then the last piece I really would like to address is during the BCTT process, one thing we heard was communication with the citizens. Like they really wanted to know what was going on. And we had a real inability as a county to communicate with people in ways that they wanted. And so I'm a little confused, and you guys may understand better because it's commissioners and you're sharing that role with that one. Are we funding? Did we give the thumbs up to fund that one position like you wanted, or is it not funded? Because I'm not clear from the discussion that we had.
We requested it, but it was not recommended for funding. So what you're asking for, the 3 things that you're asking for were not recommended for funding. I think, and I want to speak for Joe, Suzanne, and Rick, but the first priority definitely was to stabilize the department and its functions and give it some tools to kind of get level set. What you don't see recommended for funding are the communications and outreach coordinator. So that's part of the transparency. You don't see the GIS technician, the geospatial information, which is both analytics and also website upgrades, which is the transparency. And then what you really, for the most part, don't see are the long-range planning strategies, which would include housing, water, wildfire, transportation, recreation. It's the big tickets. You do see recommended for funding the Sustainable Materials Management Plan, which again is, probably 50 years overdue. So I'm excited about that. And that's a worthwhile investment, but what you don't see is additional recommended funding for those other critically important needs in the community that would help us to address housing affordability. Now, we may be able to get some support from the state of Oregon to help us move forward on those. I'm hopeful, but that's a conversation that would need to happen outside of this budget.
And I just want to mention real quick, those who are not aware, and I'm sure almost everybody in this room is aware, we're the second most expensive county to live in the state of Oregon. Housing affordability is an issue, and not just for our most needy in our communities, but for every level of our community, it's an issue. And so I would hope that all of this addresses that.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, I appreciate kind of roadmap going forward. I've probably said it before. I thought it was kind of ironic that the people that are charged with doing planning don't have time to do long-term planning because they're knocking out permits or taking care of the day-to-day. So I hope with kind of stabilizing the department, figuring out, making sure you have the pieces in place that we can maybe even before the next time we do budget, so we can have opportunity to address some of the long-term planning goals that we need, whether it's around water, wildfire, earthquakes. We have all kinds of opportunities to look to the future, and I think we need to do that, but we've got to make sure we've got the basic positions in place to take care of business, and then figure out what we need to add next. So I think this is a reasonable plan, maybe less than ideal, but a plan for moving forward. So looking forward to further conversations on this topic.
Commissioner Odro?
Thank you. I am thrilled that we're having this conversation. This vision is part of the reason I ran initially, was really to focus on long-term planning and development across the county, and to do this in an integrated way. I think these investments are critically important to all of our departments and to how the community views us overall. I hear about it every time I go out beyond the city limits, for sure. So I am looking forward to the time when we have more time on our agenda to actually have discussions about the priorities and all the policy option packages. So I know that's not today, but just wanted to let you know that I'm really excited about the potential investments.
Rick, did you want to respond to something?
I just want to make sure you guys are all done. So first of all, to Commissioner Ogero's point, I think the way in terms of this structure is getting all the good information out there for you in terms of what was decided, what wasn't decided. And then, of course, when we get into deliberation, really having that chance to maybe have a fuller conversation about any changes or priorities. So again, the portion of your budget document where we gave you the comparison of before and after will be important. I wanted to go back though to your comments, Liz, in relation. Thank you for those. I as someone that is very much in favor of affordable housing and the benefits of that, I echo everything you said. The one thing I wanted to say in terms of the recommendations made to this committee, again, it's always a difficult discussion when you have limited amounts of resources. But I think when we looked at the community development piece, we definitely wanted to make sure the stability piece was in place, the priority number one. Looking at the bigger picture of the development model was trying to make that what I always like to say, that's the seed money investment, to be able to do the planning and really to be able to look and have that cross-departmental discussion that Darren has spoken to, because I think this is really good stuff, but I think we need to have it in a broader standpoint. And that's really what that $100,000 through the Board of Commissioners leadership would have. And in terms of the other investments, it's not saying that we don't want to make those. It's that we want to be able to get to the point of doing the work, having the discussion, having the prioritization, and then being able to come out and look at it from, if it's a system piece or if it's an assessment piece, really just making sure that we do that pre-work. Particularly from a system standpoint, having experienced a lot of system development in my life, it's so important that you do the planning piece up front, right? And making sure that we cross that, dot the I's, cross the T's, making sure that we have good process place. I think between Darren and our IT department, we can really build that out and then be able to come for you with a very robust investment that package that can really meet those. But I just wanted to make sure that there was understanding from our standpoint in our decisions and our recommendation. It wasn't that there isn't value, and it wasn't saying that we didn't want to fund it. It's just how do we take those incremental steps to be able to get to that point, that place of funding. So thank you though for the question.
Thank you. Kurt or Chaz, do you have any questions?
I just have a comment. I think that finding a way to put more resources into long-range planning is critically important. You know, we need to have a future that is for us rather than a future that just happens to us because we didn't do anything about what we wanted that to be.
Thank you. Chaz?
Yeah, I think that Kurt brings up it's a really good point. I really appreciate that perspective. And I really think that it's just important that, that everything we do is very intentional, especially when it comes to these types of long-term budgets. And we all fall into that trap of just trying to get by and trying just to meet the basic minimum so that we can move on to the next day. But it is really important that we try to find time to try to be intentional with our approaches for moving forward into the future. But thank you for including me. I think we're wrapping up, but I actually have to run to another meeting. But thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chaz. Any last comments before I wrap us up?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the visit. I said earlier, really, we're laying the groundwork for a culture shift in terms of how we think about our future. And I'm torn because we are trying to make up for lost time, but we also want to do it in a way that's thoughtful and intentional, picking up on Chaz's comments there. There is no bright line path forward to the future. It really requires a lot of thoughtful, dedicated leadership. One of the things that attracted me to this job was your vision and leadership and the way that you're willing to kind of roll up your sleeves and look forward. I would just say the team and I are here to help in that. We have courage and we're ready for whatever you feel is right for Benton County. And so, we're going to take whatever investment you're willing to make and make the most of that. So, try us, but we're ready. And I say that with a little bit of caution, but we have a great team and really the time is right. We're behind, but I think we can make up for lost ground if you're willing.
Thank you. Commissioner Malone, one quick question.
Just wanted to give you congratulations, you and the team, for working on the backlog and getting the 12-week time down to 3 or 4 weeks. And I think that's really important and part of the goal of stabilizing the department, making sure you have those pieces in place before trying to take on more tasks. It's a matter of sequence, and I think you've, in a relatively short period of time, made quite a bit of progress, and I think that should be duly noted that we have some vision of the future, but we have to take care of the present before we can move on. And you get extra credit for your org chart because you put names with the positions. I meant to talk to Jesse Ott about that. I mean, it's nice to know the position, but well, who is that? And I realize that can change once you put it in print, but that's helpful for me to have some clue what the different positions are and who is doing them. So that's
Thank
what
you.
I had.
I'll just note 2 quick things. I'll highlight again, like Rick Krager said, it is the Budget Committee's prerogative to sort all this out in the end. And, after we hear all the presentations, if we want to, take some recommendations and not others, that is a decision that we will make. Just remember, if we add something, we probably got to cut something somewhere else. And then question for staff, if any budget committee members would like to follow up with you, give you a phone call, are you amenable to that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, would love that. And I think what I said a minute ago about there's no bright line for it really does take the input and thoughtful kind of caring of a number of people to move forward towards our future. So I would welcome any and all thoughts. Thank you.
And I would thank you. And I would encourage any budget committee member to do so if they need more information. And with that, Rick, did you want to say one
I'll
other
just
thing?
quickly say, Madam Vice Chair, that thank you for today. Our next agenda will be law enforcement, district attorney, and the human resources department. I will apologize in advance. We're going to race back to our desk here to be able to finish our reviews and get those out to you by Thursday. And then just I'm hoping that you're finding this engaging in terms of the process. I can't speak to the last one, but all I did was read through a lot of your notes and that you wanted to be engaged, that you wanted to be able to have opportunities for decisions. So I'm hoping that this process is working for you, but I'm always open to feedback on how to make it better. So thank you.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned at 3:20.